It's gonna be good. Cool.
Mic check.
Yeah, we when we were traveling, Miriam and I, a couple months ago, we were in southern Colorado, and I can't remember the town, but just passing through. Corey, what did we decide? Should I do the little intro to the tour first, or just let you guys intro like the space and everything, and then pass it to me?
You flow however you want to flow with it.
Like your shirt down.
Thanks, brother. It's brother from Mexico.
You give him the spotlight, he'll take over.
So I was telling him like the flow we usually do is like I do like a 10-minute intro of just what the tour's about, what the night's about.
Awesome.
And there's a talk for like half an hour. Then we do this community dialogue. Start off though, and you could talk about the space and whatever else you want to share. You know what you guys got going on, what projects you have happening.
Yeah.
And then just pass it to me, and then we'll flow.
10 minutes is we don't need much
that
time at
works.
all.
Cool.
So yeah.
So then, should you guys start with the mic then?
You want to?
Yeah, maybe they'll do that.
You can go in the water. Hey, I'm gonna talk for you.
I like this Magnum. Yeah, no, we're super dope.
This is the best brand. Hollyland. It's the best one. You can go really far.
Sweet. Let's check it out.
Super cheap
And
too.
then I guess these two as well.
Yep. I want to give you this, right? There we
Could have
go.
bought me dinner first.
Recording or streaming? Do you want me to share the stream?
Test.
We're streaming.
Where are you streaming it on?
We're on Twitch and YouTube.
Twitch and your YouTube channel?
You just dropped.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'll share it.
Corey Nature's the answer. Thank you. What is this for?
I think it just goes up. I think it's so your hand doesn't slip up over the top of
All right,
it.
hot mic.
Yeah, it's hot. We should just be in here then, right? Actually, are we going right now, or do I have time to go put on a better shirt?
Yeah, do it.
Yeah. Just hold on one sec. Let me. Just give me 3 minutes. I'm gonna go put on a nicer shirt. I feel a little underdressed. Well, you did, dang it.
Yeah.
I like how he has to say something for you to react.
He knows we're like, those aren't going in the house.
Just waiting on his shirt. He's putting on a better shirt.
A Bigfoot shirt?
No,
You'll see.
It's a mystery. Oh, I wonder.
Or just FYI, in case he doesn't know, he's mic'd up there when around. We can hear him.
Live mic. Hot mic. Hot mic.
Ready now.
All right. Yeah.
Was there a boat public?
Yeah. Oh, really? You like them? Well, that's good. Hey, you like them?
Oh, so it's Bigfoot surfing.
But like if you go into the
Bigfoot
bathroom, we're
surfing.
gonna
Like, I wish these
laugh.
people would get the help.
That's funny.
Yo.
Don't know where to stand here. Somebody's gonna get my butt, and I'm not trying to do
Bigfoot
that.
Food Forest.
In the his hut!
What's up?
The few, the proud, the brave that made it through the storms and made it by the scary signs and the thought that is Bigfoot gonna be there? That would be pretty wild and weird. We love you. There is a bunch of like-minded people here, and it is an honor to share space with you and knowledge, and also experience what we're about to experience, which will be my first time. Has anyone else seen what's about to happen? I haven't. First timer. We love that. We love that. Virgins together. We're going in. But yeah, seriously, we hope you guys feel the love here. This, from the second I landed on this spot, we fell in love. We named our last daughter Eden because we believe we have found our version of Eden. And like I said, it's an honor to share it with like-minded folk. We are attempting to develop community, which we are social animals, so it is absolutely paramount. And as technology takes us farther from each other, us, people like us, are fighting to bring us closer, to get us back on the front porches where we used to play music, break bread, and help each other. So anyway, with that said, welcome to Bigfoot Food Forest from me. It is an honor to do this with you.
Yes, and I am very honored to be with Ryan in this whole process. Thank you, Ryan, for this wonderful property. I mean, if you guys have seen it, yeah, give it a hand. I mean, it's just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Well, let me interject, though. The property is nothing without someone with this man's heart to make it what we are seeing now, right? Like, yes, we provide the land, but there is something beautiful about you and your vision and just how passionate. I remember when I was your age, and I'd be up all night, work all that, but I was going to change the world, and along the way, something happens that knocks us off that. And you've reminded me of the man that I once was, so thank you.
Well, I say he's a big inspiration too, and thank you to my family, of course, they're very supportive. I have to say that. But yeah, so Bigfoot Food Forest, this whole vision that he's talking about, well, you gotta think about, I don't know if you guys drove in here and you saw all the developments going in, but they just did that in the past couple months. They are developing all of that for thousands of homes. So this is a huge opportunity to demonstrate freedom, abundance, and all the ideas that we are not taught about in our school system. And in fact, every Tuesday here on this property, we actually host a homeschool or family meetup, where a lot of parents bring their kids and they swim, we teach them cooking, science experiments, gardening, all these things where they can just play, have fun, and learn in the process, which is the best way to learn, by the way. And that is way better, in our view, than this traditional model of schooling, which is teaching obedience rather than morality. Rather than, you are an entrepreneur, you have these skills. And so we're doing projects with them, and we're trying to find ways to do it better and better, and we have a group chat with a bunch of parents, and we organize it. In fact, this Tuesday, they're gonna go to the beach, and they're gonna do some stuff there. So it's really exciting. And, I was actually half cyber school, half public school myself, thanks to my parents that probably helped lead me to where I am. And I see the value in nature and just community. I see that there's a loneliness epidemic, fertility, all these problems, diseases, and people don't know how to confront these really big issues. Well, to me, one of the biggest ways we can address that is by coming together, first of all, and then, sharing our resources with each other. So everything that has been on this property, you might have saw like a mini food forest back there with banana trees, Mexican sunflower, toilet paper plant, and cassava, and yucca, and there's a bunch of different plants already. And we're just starting, frankly. That's all been from people just handing us plants. People who care about our mission, like Christy here, who's a wonderful permaculture designer, right? And Michelle, right? She's wonderful as well. But there's so many people, and you guys probably have so much wisdom. You guys have so much wisdom. We welcome all of that is what I'm saying. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here because it means a lot to us for what we're building. I envision this to be way bigger than what it is, what you see right now in just a couple years. We have a lot of builders in the community. We plan on building some things as well. We do have garden beds in the back. If you go back further, there's like a whole nother 3 acres that we can put Airbnbs, etc. So there's a lot of vision to that, and there's a lot of people sharing ideas. My idea is to create a tea house up up front in the front area of that property where people can actually gather and so they can socialize. People who are younger, they can learn about different ideas, kind of like a Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks, but surrounded by a food forest, creating that environment where people want to learn, and then we could use that for catering or, you know, whatever, dance parties.
Well, and also, of all the natural healers I've met in the world, the ones that truly heal, like they just grab your wrist, they look you up and down and go, this is what's wrong with you, and you go, oh my God, they always prescribe tea.
Yeah.
And we have herbologists here, we have people that understand plant medicine, so even though we will never, ever advertise that, because we're not going to get on anyone's hit list, we will provide that.
Yes.
That's the future that's coming.
Big point. Yeah, we can make tea out of all the plants. Everything in nature has anti-cancer compounds. You're wondering what the cure for cancer is? It's all around you, right? There is medicine everywhere. We just don't know how to utilize it, how to identify it. We were not taught it in school, as simple as that is. We're not taught the things that would actually free us and create a better world. So that's what we're doing, you know, and I just appreciate you guys being here. Natural Freedom Summit is a big event that I'm hosting. You'll see I have all my flyers and books here. There's a bunch of free stickers here as well you can grab. That's Derek Brose's table there with all his books and t-shirts. And so I want to say thank you to Publix as well for giving us a $50 gift card for some food, which is pretty awesome. Yeah. You know, so thank you for that. And yeah, so Ryan, anything else you want to share? Any events, anything coming up? Because you guys are always welcome. Every Saturday, every Tuesday, we're doing events, and we plan on actually going to local farms and helping them as well. And that's going to help support our project in the process.
Yeah. Nothing major. I just have this little idea where I want to help and donate to the community through our organization and do it like Bigfoot do it. So could you imagine if somebody wanted a banana tree in their yard and we let them know we're coming, but we don't show up till it's night, and we have someone in a Bigfoot outfit? Think about that in a marketing sense. We are being generous, we are giving, but we are doing it as Bigfoot does it. Guerrilla gardening, right? Bigfoot guerrilla gardening. No, that's perfect. But that's something that could generate interest, because at the end of the day, we are fighting a very difficult, long war, right? And yes, all these things being built, progress, as they call it. That was really hard to swallow as people who, when we first got here, you're talking a quarter-mile dirt road where our problem was the deer are in the road again, the gopher tortoises in the road again. That doesn't happen anymore. But maybe our purpose here is bigger than all that, because yeah, they're putting in 5,000 units. How do you conquer an empire? You have to conquer it from within, and we are buried within their organization.
Yep.
So you are all warriors, whether you know it or not, and you are part of this team, and we are grateful, and we will call upon you at some point once this thing really gets ramped up.
Yep.
And yeah, it's the good fight, right? At the end of the day, we're part of the good fight. So.
Yeah. Be sure to join our school community, which is an app, SKOOL. We have a lot of resources, actually free curriculum for homeschoolers and parents as well. And that's a great way for a map that actually shows people all throughout the state, all throughout different places in the world. We're developing a network there. We have a bunch of resources. So we're just trying to bring it together. You know, that's kind of my role. I'm like the organizer. I try to bring people together. And so I love doing that, and I want to keep doing that more and more. And then everybody just shares their skills and wisdom. Like, in fact, in here, we have a cold plunger, right?
Yeah, I built primitive, but it's a cold plunger. It works 40 degrees. So for those of you into different health modalities, or you just want to scare the crap out of yourself, we do it. I do it Mondays and Fridays, and not like the rest of my hardcore friends, but it works. Not only cancer, but what's the main thing that we're all afflicted by, especially with an American diet? It's inflammation.
Yep.
And that is one of the modalities that really helps with inflammation. So, and you want to know the most amazing part? On the homeschool day, you'd think it would be the adults that were into it. It's a mess right now because every kid lined up to do it. And I just thought, there is hope. There is hope. The next generation is, pardon my French, more badass than we are. And all we knew is just gently nudge them and then get out of the way and watch them rock, you know? So,
it's so true.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll conclude by saying what I believe to be the ideas of the future, since this is all about exit and build, decentralizing, permaculture and voluntarism. I think those are the two ideas that I call the future. And voluntarism is the idea that every interaction should be based on consent. So did you consent to the government that you live under, to the Constitution, to the birth certificate that your parents may have signed? Did they know what they got yourself into? There's so many layers to the things, the contracts, the interactions, what we give our energy to, our time. right? That we don't know where it's actually going. It might be going to war, it might be going to Medicaid and all these systems that we don't support, and school systems that aren't necessarily helping us, jail systems that bring people back into jail and bring people to jail for victimless crimes. These are all different things. It's like, how do we fix all of these different things? Well, it's so simple. The answers are always right in front of us. It starts with our own lawns, growing food, permaculture, and treating each other with respect, voluntary interaction. Most people live voluntarily every day. They only create the exception in politics. Most people say they want healthy food. They want natural food. And then, yet, now they're dependent on their doctors and the grocery stores, and they're exporting things from thousands of miles away, right? So we're living in contradiction to the things that we know is true. And that's a problem. Right? So once we recognize those contradictions, then we start to build those solutions and show a better example to the rest of the world, and that's natural leadership. People are inspired, they follow voluntarily. There's no force, there's no coercion. Governments, institutions rely a lot on deception and coercion to get what they want. That's why I love people like Derek Bros, what he's setting up all throughout the world. He's trying to decentralize. He's trying to help people see these voluntary solutions and recognize the spiritual foundation behind it, or the metaphysical, or the occult, or all these different things that we just simply are not taught about. You don't have to agree with everything. You just have to have an open mind and think for yourself, because the moment you do that, you're already free. You're free the minute that you start thinking for yourself. You know what I mean? So it's not about me telling you what to believe or what to do. It's more so how you do it, right? So thank you so much for your support, contributing to Bigfoot Food Forest, and those of you who gave money to support what we're growing here as well. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
And just understand, you guys are loved and appreciated and safe here. And if you know anyone else that needs a little boost to remember just how beautiful and wonderful they are, you send them over here. Okay? Yeah. All right. Well, you lead them in.
All right. Now the man, the myth, the legend, Derek Bros.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Sit down. And you might want to.
When it comes to kids, feed them, run them, and rest them. Right? Feed them, run them, and rest them.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Let's make some noise, Tampa. I appreciate you guys being here in surrounding areas.
Hey.
I am exhausted, but I'm so happy to be here with you guys. This is the final stop of a 26 city US tour I've been on since May. I started in May. We did the Southwest US, started in Denver, Colorado, up to California, all the way up to Portland, Boise, Idaho, went home for a few weeks. And then for the last couple of weeks, me and my buddy Manish have been traveling from Texas up to the Midwest, made our way all the way over to New York City, and then came here down with you guys. So happy to be here with you all tonight. I want to give you just a little bit of an idea of what you're in for and what the purpose of this whole tour is about. First, I do want to just give another thanks to Corey and to Ryan for having us here. Please give them another round of applause for hosting us. I always love getting to discover new spaces like this, and I hope if you guys are new to this space and somewhere reasonably close, that you guys will start getting involved with them, because that's what this is all about, is how we can build community together, bring each other together, and focus on building a better world. And by the way, you'll hear me emphasize this a few times tonight, but it's not just about us. All these crazy kids, free-range kids running around, that's what this is really about. That's what we're working towards, building a better world for them. So let's make some noise for those kids with that inner child over there running around being free. Yeah, we need more of that. So this is called the Activation Tour. And Manish and I have kind of been joking that maybe it should be called the Reactivation Tour, because I went on tour in 2021 for another tour called the Activation Tour. This is the fall of 2021, October, November 2021. And if you can cast your minds back to that far off land of 5 years ago, this was, of course, at the height of what I like to call COVID-19 '84. Maybe that means something to most of you.
I love that.
So during COVID-19 '84, particularly in the fall of 2021, lockdowns happening all around the world. Obviously not as bad here in Florida, but parts of the US and much of the world. Places like Australia, where people were literally locked in their homes and quarantine camps, and places like China, people being welded into their houses with a zero COVID policy, mask mandates, etc., etc. You guys know the whole thing. People being censored online for talking alternative viewpoints. I was actually deleted off YouTube in October 2020 because I made the mistake, I committed the crime of interviewing a doctor about intravenous vitamin C and how he was helping people with that. And YouTube said that didn't align with the World Health Organization policy. So my channel of 75,000 people was deleted overnight. Not the end of the world, right? It's just a YouTube channel, just something I've been building for years. People had it worse than that, but just an example of some of the things we were going through. We shouldn't forget. But at that time, as I was traveling then for a 45-city U.S. tour, which I have no idea how I did, the injections weren't out yet. We knew they were on the way, right? People were talking like vaccine passports, this thing called immunity passports. All these ideas were very fresh in our minds. And lots of people were rightfully concerned about the state of the world, because if you think about COVID-19 '84, just try to think about it in its historical context. This is probably in all of our lifetimes, no matter what your age is, the one event that unified the entire consciousness of humanity. Even something as big as 9/11, for example, was big in the United States, was big in New York City, but most people around the world continue to go about their lives and maybe were unaffected by it. With COVID, it was on TV stations and on your phones and on your computers and on the radio and the newspapers, and every single country around the world was impacted by it to some degree or another. So it was this single unifying event that brought people together, scared the crap out of a lot of people, and also woke up a lot of people. Was COVID the wake-up call for anybody? Yeah, so a few people, right? That's awesome. And for those who maybe were paying attention prior to COVID, was it a push to take action in any kind of way, like find community, start taking maybe life a little more serious? Yeah, a few hands. And that's what I witnessed as myself and my love Miriam Gomez, who's not here today, but she sends her regards for those who have met her. We traveled the United States trying to talk to people, not only to say, hey, the vaccines, the injections are coming, you should think about what you're going to do. Are you going to stay tied to your jobs and all these different systems which are going to be used to socially engineer you into compliance? Or are you going to start building community? Are you going to start thinking about getting out of these systems as soon as possible? And the beautiful thing about that journey, traveling around this country, meeting people just like yourself, is everywhere we went, COVID was this motivating factor. The silver lining was that it did push people to act in some way. And on one hand, it's kind of silly. Our beautiful, silly human species, we tend not to act until we feel threatened, right? So like I said, maybe some of you were paying attention. You're like, yeah, New World Order one day in the future, but I don't need to worry about it right now. I've got Netflix and AC and food in the fridge. I'll deal with that in the future. And then all of a sudden, it's staring you in the face. COVID, lockdowns, this authoritarianism rising up. And people started to act. People started to grow their own food. Some people we met started to homeschool their kids. Some of them decided to buy land and start building community. Some of them decided they wanted to get off big tech platforms and big tech systems because of the censorship they saw. Others were maybe having a spiritual journey, if you will, at the time. Whatever it was, this COVID thing caused people to actually take action. And for me, at that time, I'd been doing my work for about a decade. And as an activist, I've always been very much focused on solutions and hyper-local. What can we do about the problems in our own backyard? Because yes, while they are big, you got United Nations. Like if I say that the term Agenda 2030, does that mean anything to anybody here? Yeah? What about the Great Reset? You guys remember that? Technocracy? Right, okay, so I'm among friends here, right? While those problems are big and international and worldwide in scale, it didn't take me long to realize the solutions were local. The solutions were in our backyard, right? Because the UN and these other institutions might have big plans like Agenda 2030, but the way that they get implemented is at your city council, your town council, your school board, right? So I've always been hyper-focused on local and solutions. And so for me, it was such a beautiful experience, despite all the chaos, to be traveling the United States and meeting so many people who are finally ready to actually do something. And we're going to explore a lot of ideas tonight. Mainly, we're going to dive into what I call exit and build, which I'll explain in just a bit, and also what I call Liberation 2030, which is sort of an alternative vision for the future. Because since you all raised your hands and you said you know what Agenda 2030 is, you know what the Great Reset is, you know what technocracy is, and I'm assuming you're here because you don't want that vision of the future. And so it's one thing to know what you don't want, but it's a whole different game to know what you actually do want, right? It's one thing to say, look at me, I'm awake, I watch all the podcasts and I read all the books and I listen to all the, watch the documentaries and things like that. It's a whole different thing to actually do something about it, right? Does anybody feel like they've gotten lost the last couple years in what's now known as doom scrolling or just consuming? In my line of work in independent media, we sometimes call this conspiratainment, infotainment. Channels out there that are just feeding you clickbait and fear porn. They're not actually trying to give you solutions. They're content to just tell you how bad the world is getting as you watch it through the screens, and they monetize your fear and make a living off of it, right? That's the reality. So sometimes people get consumed in that. And unfortunately, over the last 5 years, since I went on tour in 2021, it seems like that's largely what has happened. Where there was once big groups of people organizing, active, super interested in community. Many of those groups either don't exist anymore or they've largely kind of dissipated. Is that anybody's experience? Like, were there really active groups maybe you were involved in and people super stoked on action and now not so much? Well, as I said, you're the last stop of a 26-city tour, and every single city before you guys has said the same thing. We used to have big events. We used to have 100 people showing up to our meetings. We used to have all these organizings and meetups and solutions-focused things. Either now there's nothing happening, or now it's just a handful of people. Well, my friends, you guys are the ones who cared enough to come here on a Monday evening. So I hope you realize there's no Avengers, there's no Superman and X-Men coming to save the day. It's us. It's you. So if you're waiting around for me or Corey or Ryan or anybody else to lead the way, the message of tonight is to stop waiting. It's called the Activation Tour for a reason. We're here to activate you, to motivate you, to light a fire into you, and to say, if you were concerned about what was happening 5 years ago, the same agendas are still here. It might not be called a vaccine passport anymore, an immunity passport, but 92 countries in the world have digital ID programs at various stages, including the United States. And almost every one of those countries also have central bank digital currency programs that are moving along. All the same things you were concerned about during COVID are still here. They might not be related to some alleged pandemic, but the same issues apply. And last time I checked, we're at the tail end of July 2026, and their agenda is called 2030. That doesn't mean that on January 1st, 2030, they're magically going to get their way. Nothing is completely written in stone, but it's important to recognize it's not going to happen from one day to the next. It happens incrementally, gradually. So these systems that they're trying to build, they're happening right now in front of us. And the more you are dependent on those systems, whether we're talking about a banking system, education system, food system, healthcare system, and so on and so forth, the easier it will be for them to coerce you into compliance in the same way we saw during COVID. Because I'm telling you, as I traveled the country in 2021, there were people saying to me, I'll never take that shot. They're never going to be able to force me to do it. They're going to have to drag me out of my house and kill me before I do it. And then when the time came and push came to shove, some of those people did it. Why? Because their job said, do you want to keep working? They said, do you want to keep traveling? And sometimes that was necessary. People were like, well, I need to work. I got to take care of my family, and I don't have any savings. I don't have any food put away. I don't have any community support. I guess I'll just say a prayer and hope for the best. And I've heard those stories. So my message, part of this message tonight is to say, guys, these agendas are not going anywhere. This is not about fear, it's about a call to action. If you know what's happening and if you see the direction they're trying to take things, we can either do nothing and just watch it get worse on our screens, or we can step up to the plate and do the necessary work for these coming generations to keep the idea of liberty alive so it will outlive us. That's what this is really about. So tonight we're going to go deep into that. We're going to talk about exit and build. We're going to talk about Liberation 2030. We're also going to have a moment in just a bit where I'm going to invite all of you here to share about your successes and your challenges the last 5 years. So whether that's successes in getting land, raising free children, getting off big tech, whatever it may be, we're going to have a few people who would like to share. What have you been successful at the last few years, and what areas have you faced some challenges and some difficulties so that we can learn from each other? And then I'll be back in just a bit. We'll go real deep, and if there's interest at the end of the night, we'll perform some music. But I'm happy to be here with you guys to conclude the tour. Guys, thank you so much for being here. So stoked to be ending this tour with you guys. I'm also going to share just a bit about what my exit and build journey has been, what I've been up the last 5 years, the community we're building in Mexico. It's called the Conscious Agora Eco Village. And see how we can come together and inspire each other. For now, though, I'm going to go ahead and invite my brother Manish up. I've been traveling with this brother the last couple weeks. He's got a beautiful story to share, so I invite you guys to give him your full attention. Thank you, guys.
Hi, everyone. All right. Getting mic'd up. All right. Oh, my goodness. Feels so good to be at the end of this tour. And it's like a party. It's festive, and I love it. Thank you, Corey and Ryan, for holding it down. Thank you for everyone for being here today on a Monday night. Oh, wow. I can't believe I've been on this tour for the last 2 weeks. It's like all the days have blurred into each other, and I can't even make out where I am at right now. But I'm here with what it feels like extended family, and this is really nice. It's like we're all you know, like in a similar wavelength here, and we're operating on some frequency that brought us here today. So that's amazing. And when Derek asked me to join him on tour, he was like, hey, you got a story to share, and you have no choice. That was a requirement.
That's freedom.
No, I did have a choice, but I needed to get out of my comfort zone. And I hope that my story inspires you guys to share your story, because I think we all have something that will inspire someone out there. No matter who it is, someone's out there waiting to hear your story. And my story is going to be related to exit and build throughout the journey of my life. So again, for those of you who don't know, my name is Manish, and I am from right outside of New York City. I call it the unofficial 6th borough, South Yonkers. It's just as crazy as all the other boroughs out there. And my story has like a thread that weaves through it all, and it's about organizations, systems that claim to help us and provide safety, but actually are slowly controlling us, right, and capturing us quietly. And for me, that was big medicine, big tech, corporate America, and some communities that I found myself in when I realized I wasn't ready for after I learned what I was doing. So yeah, just pre and post COVID. So the pre-COVID part starts when I was a child, and I grew up South Yonkers, surrounded by a lot of gang violence, an incredible amount of gang violence right outside my bedroom window. It being very traumatic to, live a free-range life outside like these kids here. I needed to create safety in my environment, and while my parents being, first generation here in America, working their 12-hour factory jobs, I needed to find safety, and I had one of two paths carved out for me: computers or medicine, being, first generation Indian American. And I found refuge in computers. I was that guy that was constantly breaking, tinkering with computers, putting them back together, and doing graphic design and web design during the times of MySpace before Facebook took over. And that was creating a lot of peace in my environment while all this insanity was going on. But when I was 11 years old, I was actually thrusted into the medical system with a thyroid disorder diagnosis. And that led to a bunch of visits with doctors, a bunch of blood tests, and putting me on pharmaceuticals, hormone replacement therapy to do something to my body where the root cause was never being addressed, creating a hormonal storm in my body, as well as, really affecting my neurological baseline as that of my peers in my most formative years. And it created a fog, as you can imagine, when your body's not working correctly. I got to my 20s, I was barely functioning, but I still was able to support myself through college by working at Apple in New York City, one of the largest Apple stores at the time. And I worked there for 7 years as an Apple certified Mac technician. Now, working in this environment, I helped out hundreds, thousands of people with all sorts of problems with their Apple products, right? And in front of me, I noticed a lot of people so dependent on these devices so quickly after the iPhone was first released in 2008, I believe. And people were falling apart in front of me because they were so dependent on these devices. They were storing their photos, their contacts. Nobody can remember a contact for a loved one anymore. Their password files, their identity files, and even high scores to Candy Crush. And they would be furious if they couldn't access it. It was pretty intense. So I'm on the receiving end of a lot of intensity and people falling apart. And I actually found myself falling apart even more from this disease that I was carrying since I was a child, the root cause never being addressed. I actually started experiencing early forms of dementia in my 20s, tip of the tongue moments, stopping mid-conversation because I couldn't get the word out of my mind. It was there at the surface of my mind. I had memory problems, and I started experiencing manic anxiety. It was a very intense time, and I knew something was seriously wrong, and if I continued on this path with the Western medical system, I was going to collapse. So I needed to change something, and I really, in an act of desperation, I dropped to my knees and I asked God for guidance. Really, that was what I had to do. And I was introduced to something called a mineral balancing program. Does anyone know what mineral balancing means? All right, well, for those of you who don't know, most of you seems like, or also known as nutritional balancing, I got a hair mineral analysis to determine the level of toxic metals in my body and mineral ratios. And minerals are required for all sorts of body functions. I determined to have high levels of copper, bio-unavailable copper that was directly related to my manic anxiety, and certain mineral imbalances, as well as high levels of fluoride, bromine, and chloride in my body, or chlorine, that was causing thyroid issues. They're direct antagonists to the thyroid gland. So I embarked on a detoxification protocol, but not like the ones that are promoted in the alternative mainstream therapies out here, like chelation therapy, which may be helpful, but a rather intense, where it circumvents the body's natural detox pathways. So what I did was slowly raise the vitality of my body and allowed these toxins and these imbalances to correct on their own when the time was right. So that included a diet of 6 to 9 cups of cooked vegetables. Just imagine how many vegetables that is. It's an immense amount. It's like bombarding your body full of minerals and taking targeted supplements to build like a support scaffolding to allow your body to start to heal. In addition to sauna therapy, near-infrared sauna therapy. I didn't have enough money at the time to buy one, so I built one. 3 red light bulbs from Home Depot, 250 watt, wired in parallel on a wooden board with the light switch, hung up on a wall, and I sat in front of it and allowed my body to sweat it out. In addition to doing what some people might know as an alternative cancer therapy, Gershon therapy you might hear, coffee enemas, right? And you know, that was a new thing to introduce to my system. And without getting into much details, I came up with something to create a little comfort around it. I called them Blessed Booty Blasts. You know? Thanks, Jeremiah. All right, so, I made it through. And on top of that, I did this very intense meditation that was called the pulling down exercise. And that included, well, without getting all woo-woo, it was about visualizing, me drawing in this etheric energy that's out here that I think that we can all tap into once we are consciously aware of it. So I visualized drawing in this energy from the top of my head, through the crown, about down to the bottom of my feet, very forcefully. And I did this over the course of days and months. And I slowly started to experience suppressed memories and traumas come to the surface of my mind. And this was after about 4 to 5 months, where I'm now getting the energy to process things that I experienced from my childhood. I was like, wow, this is a little weird and uncomfortable. And I wasn't seeing a therapist at the time, and I just used my inner guidance to help me move through what was happening. And that's when I realized, wow, suppressed traumas can actually cause disease. I kind of came up with that conclusion on my own. Now, so after about 5 months of being on this program, my anxiety seemingly disappeared overnight. Just like that. It was the first time I started experiencing peace and quiet in my mind. And it was an amazing feeling. And I was able to wean myself off of my thyroid medication. So that was my exit from the medical system. Yeah. Thank you. And I hope that you guys find that journey of success if you're on a similar path. So now I'm operating with this newfound clarity. I feel reborn in 2016. And I'm still working in Apple. I'm on my 7th year. And at this point, I'm walking into work and now seeing this walled garden that people are trapped in. Now that big tech has created around people and their lives embedded into these devices, as of course I was experiencing for the previous 7 years. But I at that point, I felt with clarity that something was seriously wrong with what I was seeing around me. And I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. In addition to this instability that I saw, I was constantly being blocked from my creative solutions that I had, being a self-taught technologist. I was being told by managers, this is out of the scope of support. And I didn't like being told that I couldn't help somebody out when I had a solution because it didn't follow their standard protocol. So what did I do after 7 years? Without having much of a plan, I quit my job. Didn't want to be a part of it anymore because I knew I had something better.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now, thankfully, I was able to find another job in Manhattan as a field engineer for one of the largest contemporary art galleries in the world. I was stationed on site at the headquarters for about 50 employees and a bunch of satellite offices, and I found the exact same problems happening there, being blocked from creative solutions because it wasn't part of their service agreement, in addition to this air of fear and darkness every time I walked through those halls, right? Coming from the top down. This environment that was just suppressing people's light. I felt that. And right next to me, there were in my office billions of dollars worth of art where, you have these employees that are just kind of cowering in fear. So I did that for a year and I didn't want to be a part of that environment anymore. So what did I do? I quit my job. Now, really without a plan, I was like, I'm just not going to find another corporate job anymore, but I was able to maintain some contacts and started helping people directly. Now we're in 2018, and this is when Cambridge Analytica's Facebook scandal came to light. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Cool. Excellent. I'm glad that you are aware. For those of you who don't know, Cambridge Analytica is a political consulting firm, and in 2018, they were caught harvesting the data of about 100 million user profiles through a quiz app that they released. Whoever took that app, there was a psychological profile created on you, and they used that for political targeting. And that was used most likely for the 2016 election, and most likely that information is still being used right now to manipulate people. So I was very unhappy with that. I was furious, actually, and I'm pretty sure I took that quiz. So, previous patterns, I deleted my Facebook. I just didn't want to be a part of that data harvesting. But then the next day I was like, damn, I lost access to Facebook Marketplace. So I created a burner account and was able to get some good deals. But for anyone who's considering doing that in the future, they're doing a lot of ID verification now very quickly. So just be mindful of that if you get rid of your account. I think your Facebook account is going to be valuable in the future. You can resell it. So little black market tip there. All right, so now after deleting this Facebook account, I'm slowly exiting from these big tech systems, and I needed to find an alternative. And I see this walled garden around me too, right? With Apple systems using to support my clients, and I needed to find alternatives. So I found open source as a solution. Does anyone know what open source is? Yeah. Great, cool. I love the claps here. Yeah, I think we should all be passionate about open source solutions. I mean, you can apply that to every area of life. So in my case, it was open source software that I needed to find to replace the big tech services that we've embedded our digital lives in. And I started to explore alternatives, but things weren't really mature. So it took me a couple of years to really understand what was available to replace the mainstream services like Apple and Google, etc. And I'll get more into those solutions in a moment. Fast forward to 2020 and the event that synchronized the collective consciousness of the planet, right? And I find myself losing my damn mind again. It's like, wow, what is going on? Because now through this healing journey I've been on for now at this point, the last 4 years, right? Prior to COVID, I mean, I feel like every year since then, my reality has become more and more vivid. I feel like I was reborn, and as I continue to heal my brain, I experienced life just so much more vividly. And I find myself tuning more into my intuition and able to see through BS very quickly. So I think amongst many of you guys, you saw through the BS very quickly, and I needed to do something about that living in Manhattan. And watching YouTube videos, watching doctors being censored immediately for, promoting alternative protocols, vitamin C, vitamin D, as Derek mentioned earlier. Seeing live streams being censored, in the middle of, the live stream. It was pretty insane. So I started printing out flyers, started promoting Dr. Pam Popper and Dr. Shiva and Dr. Rashid Buttar and a whole bunch of other people. But I wasn't really making a dent. People were really locked into the programming. So I was slowly losing hope. Now at this point, I've already learned about Derek's work and the Freedom Cell Network. But it took me until December of 2020, after I decided to move out of Manhattan and in with my brother right outside of New York City, to find, like minds. I was desperate for connection, right? Because I felt so alone. So joining in December of 2020, just a few weeks later into the next year, I found my soul tribe. I met some of the coolest people and still continue to meet amazing people through this network. And I consider everyone here a part of that network. And I actually met two of my best friends who just a few years ago, I had the honor of officiating their wedding, and they'll be having their first child in just a few weeks. So I'll be going back up to New York to be around for that, and having more free range babies around. And it's just been a beautiful journey. So now, continuing through this year, it was just like a marathon of meeting beautiful souls and finding solutions to connect outside of these platforms, and meet offline and do something about this. So we're meeting in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York offline in places that allowed us to gather, right, and organize. But we were also organizing on platforms that we were distrusting at this point, right? We were using Telegram as a main source of communication. And I'm sure many of us are using Telegram to find each other. And it's a great platform for content discovery, but it's contrary to popular belief. It's not a secure platform to really communicate really private thoughts. I mean, that stuff is stored in a centralized server, and it's by a private company, and it's not encrypted. And I'm actually finding now that our brother Derek is, in a way, getting censored a lot from communicating with people. I'm seeing that right in front of me. So I knew something was wrong with using this platform, and I needed to find a solution to the freedom cell that at this point I've joined. We called ourselves the Wild Worms, and we're meeting up weekly on a regular basis, and we're hosting workshops and skill building meetings, and I needed to find something more secure. I approached the group and I introduced them to Nextcloud. Who's heard of Nextcloud? Doesn't seem like many. Okay, great. Great, excellent. For those of you who don't know, Nextcloud is one of the coolest open source software that you can find online for free. And it's available for everyone to set up on your own with just a couple of videos, and you can figure it out, or just find one of us technologists and we'll help you out without a problem. Nextcloud is a software that is used by government agencies around the world, and it's used by thousands of universities for all their internal communication. It has the ability to replace all of the apps I'm pretty sure everyone is using in this room. iCloud, Dropbox, Google Drive. It can host your contacts, your calendars, your photos, your encrypted communication, time management for your clients if you run your own business, and so much more. So I approached my team. We all chipped in for our own server, and then within a couple of days, we were just communicating so much more openly off of Telegram now. We felt that we were actually able to communicate more freely, and we realized we were actually unconsciously self-censoring ourselves on Telegram. And I think a lot of us are doing that when we're using these big tech platforms. You won't know that you're doing it until you get off a platform where you know that your communication is not being harvested. So it felt amazing and very free. Now, at this point, we're halfway through the year, and through this network, I find myself moving in with two new friends, but two people that I barely knew, into a 5-acre property in South Central Pennsylvania, with a retreat center and a yurt, with a desire to homestead. Now, the landlord is living in Hawaii in paradise, and I very quickly find myself on many video calls to find out how to use his chainsaw, right, to prepare for, the coming winter, to fire up the wood boiler, to fire up the tractor that I'm gonna have to use to plow the 300-foot driveway that's gonna block me in with all the snow that's about to come. So I was pretty frantic, and I'm like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? So I'm diving into all these practical skills that I'm like forced to learn, or things are gonna get really hard. But with this retreat center and yurt, and the blueprint that Derek laid out with the People's Reset that he had hosted just months prior, connecting with your local community, meeting like-minded freedom people, meeting your local farmer. I went out there and started networking. I found amazing people right there where I moved to. Specifically, I want to call out Farmer Pete, an 80-year-old master grower responsible for 12,000 square feet of greenhouse space, growing the most nutritionally dense food I've ever had the pleasure of tasting. And I felt myself like leveling up, my brain functioning even better with just his food in a way that I didn't think was possible. And, he taught us so much, and to the point where he trusted me enough to use an excavator on his property. I was like, hey, yeah, I know how to use a joystick. So he got me in the excavator, and I took down a poplar tree within a matter of minutes and damaged the greenhouse. But it's all good. We repaired pretty quickly. So now with this retreat center and all the network that we're building, and the people from the Freedom Cell network, we're inviting people to come and spend a weekend with us multiple times throughout the year for like holistic events, like yoga, wellness, like, teaching all sorts of things like nonviolent communication, sociocratic decision making. We're doing, drum circles and ecstatic dance and, practical skill building workshops like how to tend to the soil and how to build a garden bed. I mean, you name it. We were trying to get our hands into everything. And we were just bonding in a way that, it was just, I never got to experience, and, breaking bread around potlucks, not breaking bed. Slip of the tongue, that didn't happen. Not in this environment, but that's the first time that's happened. Pardon me, on a live stream. So it was really a beautiful time, I have to say. But, in the background of all of this, right, something was brewing, and it was a lot of overwhelm, as you can imagine. And I did this for 2 years. Now, in addition to all of that workshops and those retreats that we did, we also did host watch parties with the People's Reset, where we were able to live stream, and we also, just like Corey stating, getting some donations from Publix, we also got donations from local businesses to host community events. We got event spaces donated to us, a bunch of food donated, and we even highlighted the farmers and the local artisans that were in our environment to share their work. So it felt amazing. It's like, hey, we're following this new path that is laid out before us. But again, this overwhelm was slowly building up. Now, it's 2023, and at this point, I'm dating one of my roommates at the time, and we're finally realizing, her and I, we sit down, hey, this is getting way too out of hand for us to manage by ourselves. We did have support, and we did invite some people to live on the property, but we realized, through, a lot of intense situations, that just because we have a shared distrust of the system doesn't necessarily mean that you'll find people with the same shared values, right? And I'm not saying, people are out to do anything evil deliberately. Ultimately, it's really important to have these important conversations to really get on the same page, and you want to have those up front. So we kind of skipped that step, and it backfired. And we decided to just slow down and realize that this was not for us. And I needed to take a step back and realize that ultimately, what were my unconscious motivations to jumping into these things? And I did a lot of inner work to figure that out. And I had to really deal with my blind spots that were now at this point being called out to me, right? Wow, yeah, that was an intense time, to say the least. And I still continue to go through these lessons, right? And I definitely don't want to find myself into these patterns, because that's where, you lose a lot of money, and most importantly, you lose a lot of your inner peace. So I've been on this journey of self-discovery, and after moving out of South Central Pennsylvania, I've just had the pleasure of traveling the world. Been to Costa Rica, Mexico, Indonesia. I've been all around the country to really see how other people are doing things. And thankfully, I've had the pleasure of coming to this land, but I've heard about Corey's work for quite some time, right? And I think you guys are doing an amazing job from what I can see. Holden Hart, it's beautiful. So thank you so much. Because it's really difficult to do this work. And also hearing about Derek's journey with, the Conscious Agora, which he's going to get into later. And really, I want to highlight the People's Reset, where this year was my second time. And after a lot of the lessons that I've learned, I'm meeting some like-minded people that we are aligned with the shared values. you know, and at this point, I can see myself, okay, getting back into this work of connecting, because ultimately I think that's what we're here to do and build outside of these systems. So thankfully, there's some future projects that are in line for me. And I just encourage everyone to just step out of your comfort zone if you haven't done that already, outside of, you know, the place that you've grown up in. And I know a lot of people have moved here to experience something new. And I wish you great success. So in addition to all of this inner work and operating with more discernment and not jumping into anything crazy, I have been refining my open source tech stack. And I launched a business, sovereigntechservices.com. And I can help people at this point offer white glove support in moving you out of your walled garden into your own digital Garden of Eden, is what I like to call it. All right, so there's a bunch of open source solutions that exist in which I can support people just kind of migrate your entire digital landscape. So if you're interested, thank you very much. And I want to shout out, you know, one of our sponsors, Hakeem, who runs the Above Phone, who essentially will get you started. Who will get you started with that process. He offers devices that are pre-built, secure out of the box. Also offers free webinars and things that you could do on your own to really just start the process. And I can take you to the next level if you desire to go deeper. And there's just so much more. But I gave you a condensed snapshot of my reality. And in conclusion, ultimately, just start a little slow, you know. It seems like a lot of people are already on a great path here, but what I would suggest is, just start small with like changing your file storage provider if you can, or grabbing a seed and planting it out there in an urban space and watching it grow, and just can constantly check yourself, when it comes to jumping into this new life that we're building for ourselves. Now, before I step off and hand it over to our brother, Derek, I do want to call back to what I mentioned about Telegram being a great content discovery platform. And I found 2 years ago this body of work called the Christ Letters. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of this. It's rather obscure, and I don't want to make this a religious talk, but there was that body of work just completely upgraded my life. And as I was doing all of this inner work, I realized I needed to spend more time having faith in something outside of myself, right? Into a higher authority. And I know everyone here has their individual views and opinions about this, but it was really important for me to do this so that I can move forward with clarity. And there was a prayer that was introduced to me that I want to share with you all tonight, if that's okay. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for the permission. It's similar to the Serenity Prayer, all right? Like a modern version of it. So I invite everyone to settle into your seats as you are, or as you stand, and close your eyes if you like. And as you hear my words, allow them to seep into your consciousness and down into every cell of your being. And so you can take a few deep breaths. Father, Mother, Life, you are my life, my constant support, my health, my protection, my perfect fulfillment of every need, and my highest inspiration. I ask you to reveal the true reality of yourself to me. I know it is your will that I shall be fully illumined, so I may better receive awareness of your presence within and around me. I believe and know that this is possible. I believe that you protect and maintain me within perfect love. I know my eventual purpose is to express you. As I speak to you, I know that you are perfectly receptive of me, for you are a universal, loving intelligence which has so marvelously designed this world and brought it into visible form. I know that as I ask you to speak to me, I am sending out a consciousness searchlight into your divine consciousness. And as I listen, you will be penetrating my human consciousness and coming ever closer to my increasingly receptive mind and heart. I commit myself and my life into your care. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight and for your attention and your presence. Let's give it up for our brother Derek. Thanks, bro.
That was it. He did it 2 weeks with me. You made it. Thanks for sharing your story, brother.
Can you hold
Let
on
me
one
get a shot
second?
of the two of you there.
Hey guys, one second though.
Sure.
I just wanna see if the battery's on.
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
Uno, dos, tres. Boom. Got it. Thank you.
All right.
It sounded a little murky for a while, but I don't know.
I heard it making noises. Okay. There we go.
All right. Thank you.
Should I use the other one?
Okay, no, it's fine.
Check, check.
Those are okay.
What's
That
your
one.
last name?
Just Manish.
It's
Just Manish. He's like Madonna.
Like
It's just Manish. Awesome. All right, guys, let's continue on while we got some daylight. So, like I said, before I get into my presentation, I do want to take a moment to invite everybody who is here to share a little bit about some of their successes and challenges you may have had in the last 5 years or so in your pursuit of a more free world, or for those of you who have heard me speak about exit and build and kind of know what that's about, which it sounds like some of you are already doing. Let's start with successes. Who here would like to share about some successes you've had? Just a couple minutes so we can keep it brief and share as many. You want to share first? Come on up. Just share with us your name.
Just open mic it.
Yep, do that. And just about what area you have some success.
So my name's Christine, and where I'm really successful is in educating people in permaculture principles and practices around the globe. And I've been lucky enough to do that on Zoom.
How many people are tuned in?
Which is a technical thing. So I'm able to reach a lot of people in that way. And in 2024, I had a 14-person in-person permaculture design course in Inverness, Florida. And that was a great success. We created an awesome community that you're talking about, like having permablitzes and creating a community in and around Citrus County. So that was really exciting to be a part of.
Thank you, great share.
Not anymore. I'm in Tampa now.
So find her if you want to learn more about her Zooms. Who else would like to share? Again, this can be in raising free kids, getting off big tech, growing food, getting land, getting out of the healthcare system. Any success you'd like to share, big or small?
Hey everybody, my name is Ife, and we're living in Central Florida. And I would say my biggest success is for the last close to 20 years, I've been in all these different creative communities, just trying to find a way to stay together, mostly socially. And finally, I connected with the whole trifecta concept and really got clear on my relationship to life and to source. And I finally connected sovereignty to wellness and interconnection. And when I did that, that was for me, the green key, the green light, the key, that I needed to feel like we can actually build something sustainable inside of the silent community. So that kind of clarity was my success. So,
Yeah, look forward to hearing more about that.
And that's IFA, E-F-A.
it's IFE.
I-F-E.
You were almost on. Okay, let's get another success. Come on, brother. Yeah, this is how we learn from each other, by sharing about what we're succeeding at. In a moment, we're going to talk about some of the challenges we're facing and be real about them.
Hello, everybody. My name's Stan, and so at the beginning of COVID, I realized how ignorant I was of the law. So what I did is for the last 6 years, I actually delved into studying the law and legal system. I'm a self-proclaimed income tax expert, and I can tell you that you do not owe these things. And so legally, you can just stop filing your 1040 and stop giving your money away to the criminals who are using it for whatever they want. So that's my story. 6 years of learning the law and legal system. And my mission is to help people learn generational wisdom, generational wealth. Because with the knowledge I've attained, knowledge applied is wisdom. And then you can carry that on for your generations. Because we can't really move forward with everything we're trying to do. We don't understand the laws or our norms. So for me, if you want to learn the law, I can share my information with you, and you want to start on that journey, I can get you a jump start and help you understand the world that we're living in and navigate. Because all the things we're trying to do, we know they're going to come taking us. They're going to try. But none of us really understand the law or the legal systems that we are in. So if that interests anybody, just come talk to me and I can help you out.
You're going to get the next one. You want to share one? Yeah.
Eminem.
Hey guys. So my background is in construction and handyman, tech work as a permaculture designer, HVAC tech, solar installer, and I'm getting old. And a year and a half ago, a friend of mine suggested, we have a lot of knowledge between us. We should be able to figure out how to make AI profitable and put all of our knowledge to use. I spent the last year and a half learning how to use AI, and because I started asking AI how to use AI. Like, how do I use you? I want to learn about this. Teach me how to learn everything and anything that I've needed to know from to the point that I opened my first GitHub account last May, doing software development. Brand spanking new. My first question was like, what's a command line? How do I open up command line on my computer? I was a complete fucking novice. This is entry-level stuff. A year later, I joined an AI startup in Austin, getting jobs while other software developers with 30 years experience aren't fucking working. And I'm getting paid. And I'm now a co-founder with a decentralized, open source Bitcoin project that's integrating AI with Bitcoin. And the difference is we're letting people put our existing computer technology, all of our hardware, all of our memory, all of our RAM existing in our offices and our laptops, to monetize it with permissionless manner so that we don't need a centralized data center. We already have 20 times more compute in our offices and our gaming computers than these data centers. We don't need them. We can all put our knowledge to use that we've accumulated over our lifetimes with these large language modules, because most of us came from a generation that actually read. We have a vocabulary that far outpaces these youngsters. If you have a small language model, you can't interact with a large language module nearly as effectively. These models require you to know what to tell them, what to ask, how to learn. The more you know, the more you need to learn. We now have a tutor that can take us from a novice to an expert available, so we have to put it on our own hardware and not outsource it. Just like everything else, our money, our communications, and these tools are now coming available. So one success story that's just come out of this is Buzz. Jack Dorsey just released a second free open source tool this past week that lets us connect our AI agents and earn and pay Bitcoin between our AI agents in a manner nobody can shut down. And the BitChat app that he launched is a permissionless Bluetooth app that we can install on our phones so we can connect locally and send a message to this whole group. We have a local BitChat number, geohash, that then anybody in the world can chime in and watch and communicate with us while we're sharing messages directly between us. We can have a little group forum nobody can shut down. And it's so effective, like we're old enough, we remember the Barbra Streisand effect. It's real. India just outlawed BitChat. Gave 3 fucking hours for the developer to remove this open source technology from GitHub. Now that there's 300 fucking copies all around the world, everybody's like, fuck you. play your game of whack-a-mole. Sorry, pardon the language, but I just wanted to invite everybody to start using AI, to learn how to use AI. And our retirement incomes, our savings, our fixed income is diminishing in value. All of us know a lot that the world needs. Use AI, figure out how to build a website, earn some passive income so you can rely on it, because Social Security can be working like 10 years from now. Like, build something on your own server in your own closet, please.
Thank you, brother. All right. Is there one more success before we switch to challenges?
I have one.
Yeah, there we go. Pick up the mic.
This guy and me, we made that kid Corey. That's our success.
That is an amazing success.
30 seconds of fame for my husband, but
That's 10 more seconds than the rest of us. So.
since he's 12, yeah, he has been on us that we're not awake enough and we didn't know what was going on since he's 12. And for Christmas, he wanted those Ranger buckets. And I was like, what are you talking about? Food. Like, why am I getting 25-year-old food? That's what he wanted for Christmas. That woke us up like, oh my gosh, my son is on some other page, but he knows what he's talking about.
Hey, give it up. Give it up for Corey and for the mom and dad here. All right, that is quite a success, I would say, because Corey's doing awesome work. And, you know, I'll share my story just a bit, but whenever I've been connected with Corey and seen the passion he has, it inspires me and motivates me to know that there's others, you know, just a little bit younger than myself and others older than me. This is a generational thing. We're all working towards it. So you guys did a great job. Awesome job, Dad. The least work you've ever done for the best thing outcome, right? All right, let's for the best outcome. Let's switch gears now and talk about some challenges. Corey's got some challenges, struggles.
Well, I do want to share. No, like, actually, it is crazy to think that after all these years, I'd be meeting Derek Rose and all these people that I've long followed. Right? I mean, so it is pretty crazy, right, to think about that. But that just shows you the impact you make that you don't even know. That there could be people, teenagers, who are following your work, who don't know like where to go or what to do because they're like stuck in this generation of people who are like on their phones, right? So that's why I'm very passionate about like the whole tea house idea, you know, trying to get the youth. But there's multiple things that I do want to applaud you for, and I'm not just here to like boost your ego, but there's the critiques for independent media, and generally everybody out here who's a truth seeker, I think you often commit to action. Like, first of all, I think most of independent media, like you said, is kind of not doing that. They're in it for the consumerism, for the clicks, for the money, and that's always been a problem. And that's something why I always admire your work. I admired Etienne de la Bozzi from artofliberty.org, and he's actually moving down here, like literally this month. So that's amazing. That means we get to collaborate with him. And that's going to open up so much more potential for this project and what we're building. So, like, I don't know if it's all just life bringing it all into the same area, but I just want to say I'm grateful for that. And it is a challenge because when I was looking for land, I was doing events every single month in Moonbury Mercantile, which is in Tarpon Springs, the top Greek town in all of America. And I was partnered with the business there. And I'm helping other people throughout the nation now, you know, network with other people to do kind of what we're doing. And we're opening up multiple Bigfoot Food Forest locations and a bunch of stuff like that, making it all replicable. I had a difficulty finding land, and especially in this area because it's all developing, but in general, I even sat down with people who were developers and all these things. I was doing everything in my power to try to find land. So I think the number one thing is persistence and not ever giving up. Because that's kind of how I did it with my YouTube channel. Like when I started, it was just my mom watching. Like literally, I was just having like one view for like a good month or two, you know what I mean? And then now it's like I have at least a couple hundred, at least several thousand. And it's another struggle would be a lot of small content creators, they need more spotlight. Like that's another thing that I also applaud you for. There's just not enough people doing it. Why isn't there an action page on InfoWars, on Natural News, and all these big guys? And I'm connected with some of them now. And I tell them, you know, I'm not afraid to say what I think needs to be done is there needs to be more action, more organization, less, you know, buy my supplements, buy my merch. And I'm not afraid to speak about that since I was consuming it for so many years, and I would go to their comment section and everybody was like, what do we do? Let's start a revolution. How do we organize? And it was like that every single day. Like, I don't know if you guys see that. Like, everywhere there's like a really big post. Everybody's like, let's do something. And then, like, everybody either thinks of revolution, voting, and it's like, that's not it. Right? And so what you're talking about with the exit and build and growing food and voluntarism, these are unique ideas. And I just want to say, among all the ideas in the independent media, the struggle is showing the ideas that actually get people moving, which often is confrontating themselves, and giving a spotlight to smaller creators. That's why I'm doing the summit, by the way, because the more I do those events, the more I can give a spotlight to everybody. So you're all invited. Like, anybody here can be a speaker to that event, and you're all welcome.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Thank you. Yeah, I think those are some real challenges as far as getting land. So just by a show of hands, I know it won't be everybody, but who here sort of has that as their whether short-term or long-term ambition to get land, whether just you and your family or with like-minded people? So yeah, a good amount of people here. And one struggle that I'll add to this, and hopefully we can get another person to share. One struggle, one challenge I've heard across this country: finding my tribe, finding the right people, finding people who are ready to take action. Right? Does anybody else resonate with that? Yeah. Probably everybody who just raised their hands, right? And I don't have any easy answers for that other than to say to be persistent, to come to events like this, to get involved. That's the whole purpose of doing this tour. Is the idea is that we bring you guys together. We're leaving tomorrow to go on to do other things, but hopefully this is not the end, right? For those who've never been here before, not connected to Corey, I want to just kind of throw this seed out there. And Corey, I want you to step aside for this so we can activate somebody else to start the email list here tonight, or to start the Telegram group that keeps you guys all connected. Because it would really suck if we come together tonight and all of you just said you're looking for like-minded people. There's like-minded people around here. These might not be the people you move on to land with, but these are people you can collaborate with. And it would really suck if by the end of tonight, tomorrow, y'all never see each other again. So whoever wants to be the activator, we've been asking this in every city, whoever wants to find a piece of paper or start a Telegram group and pass it around and get everybody joined. Again, Corey, you're not allowed to participate. You do too much already. We need somebody else to step up, because we can't just be waiting for the Coreys, and we need to activate other people, right? So I just want to throw that seed out there. Hopefully one of y'all will step up and make sure that tonight's not the end of it. Because that's really the key, is coming together. And I'll talk more about Freedom Cells later on. I know Manish mentioned it, because that's a tool that I helped build, a website, freedomcells.org, that helps people find like-minded individuals in their community for that purpose. But let's hear another challenge. Anybody else would like to share a challenge? Sure.
Is that freedomcells.org?
CELLS.org.
Freedomcells.org.
Sorry. My challenge is kind of from serious experience that an entire country at some point experienced. In March 1st, 1990, I was a young, successful entrepreneur and woke up to find out I was poor. My bank account money was gone. The entire country's bank account money was gone. There was about 2 months, maybe 3 months of survival left in our accounts. That country was Brazil. Anybody can research that. It was called Plano Collor. There was no warning, no pre-sign. We woke up and had to deal with the harsh reality. So I think after everything that happened through the past 6-7 years, I've been figuring out maybe Brazil was a test ground. And maybe those things are in the making here. And the last thing I want is for us to one day wake up and find we're too late to take action. Okay? I'll hand back to you.
Thank you. So you said in Brazil, right? Because that's where you said. So 1991? 1990. She's talking about wealth being wiped out overnight. Basically, things like hyperinflation. That is definitely a challenge. If your wealth, whatever little or big wealth you have, is wiped out overnight, it makes it pretty hard to plan. We'll be talking about some ideas on that in just a bit. I kind of touched on this earlier. The more dependent you are on their systems, whether it's the banking system, the dollar itself, easier it is for them to control you and manipulate you. Easier said than done to get out of that system, but it's definitely something we need to consider. You want to add something?
It was not just the money. There were other actions. Because these people, they plan things. So on top of leaving the entire population without money, in shock, and having to act and survive, they also took away from us the tools to communicate and inform. I was a cultural event producer, and there was no way that I could continue working, because thinking comes through culture, comes through sharing, and they took that away because they knew if that was there would be a way to come back. So the plans in the making, they structure things very well, but we are outnumbered and outsmarted.
Could you explain how they took that away, besides money?
With law. With law.
With the law?
Yeah, they
illegal to gather?
They closed the mechanisms that were in place for us to fundraise, to produce cultural events. So there was no way for us to continue working.
No public funding, stuff like that.
No public fundings, no private fundings. There was nothing, and we were outlaughed basically like if you were very good in managing money, 2 months of survival. So that's the situation.
Sure. Yeah, we'll get into some of that in a little bit when we talk about the exiting a building from the economy, because this is one area where there are some solutions, and again, it's not easy, but it's obviously a worthy effort, because you don't want to be in that position where all of your wealth and ability to survive is wiped out. Can we get one more challenge before I jump into my presentation? Anybody want to share challenges, big or small? Raising free kids, getting off the system in some way?
Challenging folk to overcome cognitive dissonance, because we're lied to by otherwise trusted authorities. I'm 71. There's one gentleman here, 77, is older than me, and we remember when Kennedy was assassinated, and a clever CIA agent came up with the term conspiracy theorist to discredit anybody who questioned the bogus fraud that is the lone gunman theory. And so it's been this process of exploitation and repression has been going on for a long time, and I think we're in an ages-old struggle, not a fight. It's an ages-old struggle for justice. Thank you.
And thank you for that thought. And by the way, I mean, so are you literally the reincarnation of Abraham Lincoln?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that you're aware of. Okay, so
Not that
you're.
I'm aware of.
I had to ask. I'm sorry. Okay, so he's talking about the struggle of cognitive dissonance, reaching people right, and I'm sure everybody here can relate to that in some way if you've ever tried to reach anybody around you. I think Corey kind of hinted at a solution there, which is to get more people talking about this. Now, one thing I'll say about this, just real briefly, before I start my talk here, is that, I don't know, I started doing this in 2009, 2010, and there's definitely way more people talking about so-called conspiracy theories than there was 16 years ago. But at the same time, it feels like the space is oversaturated with a lot of crap, too. Like, there's more false information out there. There's, like, sure, yeah, a lot of people question all kinds of things, but I see so many people out there, and I have friends and family reach out to ask me, Derek, is this true? Can you tell me if this is real? Like, they want me to fact check for them, because people have a hard time telling what's real and what's not anymore. AI is definitely contributing to that as well now. So yeah, even though there are, I think, more people asking questions, from my perspective, I see less, like, not less truth, but definitely more difficulty. Like, I can only imagine how it feels to just wake up right now with the chaos of the potential to get sucked down a QAnon rabbit hole, or get sucked down this thing, or go down this way. When I was waking up in 2009, 2010, it was mainly people talking about 9/11 and some other things. And yeah, there was aliens and other things happening, but now it just feels like there's so much happening. I can only imagine just how chaotic. And there are so many false dead ends. And so for me, one of the ideas would be supporting people who are doing content that you like. I mean, I'll just shout out my own work for a moment. That's the reason I made the Pyramid of Power documentary series and the book series, because I got sick of seeing a lot of other documentaries that are like filled with fear, filled with doom, and fake information. And so I wanted to make something that people could share. And I feel so blessed and honored that people have told me they've used the Pyramid of Power to homeschool their kids, and they've used it for all kinds of different things because they like the approach. And it's not telling people the end of the world. It has solutions in it, and it has references and sources. So one solution, I think, is to try to send people towards better content. They might not always listen. There is that cognitive dissonance, and we can't ultimately do anything about that, right? We can yell and scream and call people sheeple and this and that. It's not going to help at the end of the day. They have to have their own awakening. And we all have our own stories, I know, but what I've seen, the consistent thing over the years, is there tends to be some sort of major life shift or traumatic event that ends up causing people to start questioning everything. I'm about to share with you guys my story, but I've had friends like, I got cancer, and that led me down this health journey, and then that led to question everything else. Or the financial crisis happened, and I lost all my money, and that led me to questioning the Federal Reserve. You know, something personal impacts them, and then they're finally ready to like, okay, let me, you know, go down this. So you can't force people to be free. You can't force people to ask questions. We can just be here, and when they're ready, you know, say, hey, let me show you what I've found. And I don't think it helps to berate them and attack them. Like, you're so stupid, look at you, you fool. Not that you would, but you know what I mean.
We want to influence people.
Exactly, be a positive influence. All right, let's give a round of applause to everybody who shared their struggles, their challenges, their successes as well. We are at 8 o'clock now, and I am going to go deep with you guys. This is the last time I'm giving this presentation. Let me just take a deep breath and sink that in. Oh, thank you guys for being here. So I'm hoping to give you the best version of this since I've done it 25 times before this now. It's about an hour and 15 minutes if I give you the full thing. Is that okay? Like, this is, we just go, we'll do it, right? Awesome, let's do it. Thank you guys. So let's start by talking about, well, first I want to share with you guys a little bit of my background for those who don't know who I am or maybe have never heard my story. And it's the reason I'm going to share this is it's going to directly inform when we talk about exit and build and getting out of the technocracy. I want you guys to understand what led me to that path and really what this message is ultimately about. So for those who don't know, Derek Brose, 41 years old, originally born in Houston, Texas. I started to wake up in 2009, 2010. I read a book called Rule by Secrecy by author Jim Marrs. I watched an old school Alex Jones documentary, Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement. And I heard this guy named Ron Paul speak at the University of Houston. And all of that happened within a span of a year, and my head cracked open and nothing was ever the same again. And I just dove right in. And as I said earlier, for me, it felt very important from the beginning to focus on solutions. And so I drove everybody around me crazy, sort of like you're talking about, like, why don't you see this? Probably what Corey was trying to do to you guys. Read this, watch this, pay attention. And after I pushed everybody away, I found two friends who didn't think I was crazy, and we started an activist group. It was called the Houston Freethinkers. And from 2010 to 2018, the Houston Freethinkers was my daily life. I mean, this was everything. All of a sudden, the world made sense to me. Things that I just couldn't quite put together. Why I never fit in at school. Why I rejected all these different systems. It started to make sense, and it felt like I'd finally found my purpose. And so I put all of my passion into activism in Houston. And this was the usual, typical things, you know, protests, marches, rallies, those sorts of things. But it was also community gardens, urban farming. It was, you know, doing benefit shows, raising money for different causes. We would do money for victims of domestic violence, raise money for Veterans for Peace, anti-drug war shows, and just anything we could think of. Eventually, I lived in a house called the Freethinker House. We had 3 versions of this. It was just me and a couple other members. Corey, should I put the mic back on, or are we good? Good, okay, cool. A couple other members of the group, we basically decided, let's get a house. This will give us a space, a headquarters to do all the things we want to do. So this became the place where we had monthly meetings. We would host documentary screenings, 9/11 truth stuff, the world according to Monsanto, Federal Reserve, you know, whatever it was we were paying attention to. We also had a library of books there that people could check out. We had a community garden at the house. We would have house shows, bringing local bands there because my background prior to activism was in music. I've always been in bands, and I also was into promotion. So I started just bringing all the bands I knew and bring them into the activist cause. And yeah, this was my life for 8 years, just doing all these different forms of activism. And if you think about this time period, 2007, 2008 is the financial crisis, right? 2009, you start to see the Tea Party movement on the right. You see Ron Paul's first presidential campaign, the End the Fed movement. Early 2011, the Occupy Wall Street movement launches. This is the era that I was really waking up, and I was in my early 20s, and I was just diving headfirst in. And as I said, we did the confrontational stuff, the cop watching, the marches, the rallies, the sit-ins, and had some fun activist arrests. And then we also did the more solutions-focused things. We did skill shares, teaching people how to make their own soap, how to bake their own bread, how to do all kinds of things that we felt were valuable. And it was such a beautiful time in my life. And everything that I learned and everything that I promoted with the Houston Freethinkers, with Freedom Cells, with Exit and Build, all of that is based on what I learned in the streets of Houston. And what I just shared there, all of that is really my kind of journey about waking up with the physical world, you know, starting to question government, corporations, the physical institutions of power, they, them, those. Who are these people? What are their names? And what are these organizations? That was a big part of my journey, of course. But I'd like to share just real briefly the other side of that journey, which is how I started to wake up on the more internal realm. And so, as I said, I started to wake up to the politics and so-called conspiracies in 2009, 2010. But my real wake-up experience happened in 2005. November 2005, I got arrested for possession of crystal meth. I had been addicted to drugs for about 2 years right out of high school. I was really, a smart kid in high school, but I was also going through a lot of trauma, and I was the crazy kid. I was getting arrested, getting in fights, throwing chairs at teachers, doing the whole thing. And I actually graduated high school early. In my senior year, while all my friends were finishing high school, I graduated the first half of the year, went right into college, got a full-time job, and really was just kind of overwhelmed by it all. And as you sometimes do at that time in your life, I started drinking quite a bit. And I don't mean sharing a couple beers with friends. I mean, the first time I ever got drunk, I took 18 shots of tequila and rolled around naked on the ground. While my brother filmed me and laughed at me with his friends. Thankfully, this is before smartphones, so none of that ever exists anywhere. But whenever friends would come over, he'd love to pop that tape in. He's like, look what Derek did. And so, I mean, like very self-destruction, like in terms of drinking, I think my record was 23 beer bongs in one night, puking everywhere, just really destructive. And eventually the drinking turned into pills, and the pills turned into cocaine, and the cocaine turned into crystal meth. And I tried crystal in January 2005. By the summer 2005, I was homeless, living on the streets. I was eventually living in a crack meth house. And then I was able to get myself sober. I knew I was kind of not headed in the right direction. I was able to get myself out of that. But I was still kind of running in those same circles, and I needed to make some money, so I did one more deal. And that one more deal is what got me arrested in November 2005, the week before I turned 21. And so as I'm sitting in the county jail waiting to get my sentence, realizing that I think I probably really screwed up. I don't think I'm going home tomorrow. And then I eventually got my sentence, and I'm looking at the calendar, it's November 2005. The earliest I was going to be going home was September or October 2006, the next year. And I don't know if you guys can relate to this experience of truly feeling powerless. Something that you've done and you can't undo, and there's nothing you can, you can do to fix it. I could go over here and get on the phone and call my lawyer, call mom, call dad, call my girlfriend, cry, complain. I could be mad at the world. None of it made a damn of a difference. I was not leaving this place until these people said I could leave. And in that moment, all these little small freedoms that I think we take for granted, like using the bathroom in privacy, eating what you want when you want, going to sleep when you want, all those things wiped away, gone, taken away. And it was in this space of really feeling truly powerless, and in a space filled with ego and fear and all this kind of stuff. This is where I really started to tap in and find my true power. Thankfully, I had a very big spiritual influence in my life. My grandmother, she started to send me books on prayer and meditation, specifically Zen Buddhism and Zazen meditation, as well as books by Father Thomas Keating, who is kind of a Christian mystic, some call him, and he promoted what he called centering prayer, which is a sort of a type of Christian meditation. And at this time in my life, just brand new into 21, the idea of spirituality, religion, anything to do with God or anything beyond the five senses was not in my horizons. If I had any feelings about that, it was that I hated God, that I didn't want anything to do with it. And this is because I had a lot of anger and trauma as a young teenager, and so I never was willing to even think about those things. But because it was coming from my grandmother, and because I was stuck and had nothing but time, I decided to start reading these books and trying to start these practices. I also started journaling every day, just like pen and a pad, and just writing my thoughts out and trying to understand, what was I doing? Why did I think sticking so many drugs in my body was the answer? Why did I, what was I trying to run away from and try to hide from? And as I'm starting to meditate, as I'm starting to kind of center myself and journaling and just on this journey, I started to see this very clear path, which was probably obvious to everybody but me at the time. And I could see that so much of my trauma was related to my birth father. My birth father was in and out of my life throughout my entire young adult years. He was, my earliest memories at 5 years old are visiting my father in prison. He had been in and out of my life in prison for his drug addiction. And I started to see this, realize that this lineage on my father's side, the Bros men, and on my mother's side, the Sanchez men, at least 3 generations back, there's this intergenerational trauma of drugs, alcohol, suicide, and prison. And I was sort of just the latest version of this. And it's interesting, I remember when me and my brother were younger, we would call this the family tradition, because we just saw it as like, that's just what our family was like. But when I found myself in that position, and I started to look and I could see, wow, I've just been dealing with all this trauma. I was very depressed at a young age. I started to try to, doing self-harm, cutting myself at like 7 years old. Then eventually the sad kid turned into an angry teenager. The angry teenager decided to start using drugs, and I found myself in prison. So that was really the beginning of a healing journey that continues on today. As I'm sure you guys know, it's not a one and done. You continue to heal and evolve and grow throughout your life. And eventually I got out the following year, but I'm kind of a slow learner. So I did the first year, I got out, lasted about 5 months, then they sent me back again. And I did this whole thing for a couple of years. And when all was said and done, I did 19 months in Texas state prisons. I got out for the final time in October 2008 as a felon. You know, if you know anything about being a felon in the United States, it means you can't get rented here, you can't get a job here. Some people judge you. Like in the felon community, people say you have an X on your back, you got a bullseye on your back, because it can really limit you. And people might judge you because they assume whatever that means about you. And also, you know, the interesting thing, the sad thing is, this past November 2025, was the 20th anniversary of my arrest. That's actually why I wrote my memoir, for those of you who know about that. And if I was to go out right now and try to find a mainstream job, you better believe that my 20-year-old felony would absolutely come up. Thankfully, I've been blessed to kind of create my own path as an entrepreneur and as an independent journalist, and nobody's ever asked me to do a background check to write an article for them, so I'm doing all right without it. But, you know, there are still a lot of people who deal with those challenges, you know, it's a real thing, right? So I get out October 2008, I'm coming out into the world, now I'm a felon, and I'm also the happiest I'd ever been in my life. I think I probably hadn't experienced happiness up until that point. I'm 23 years old, just did a couple years in prison, fresh out, but I'm just so excited for the world. Not only had the drugs left my body and I'd gotten sober, I rediscovered that I'm an intelligent person, I wanted to learn and understand the world. And it was really in that space that I started to see things in a new light. And this is an interesting time, again, to kind of be re-emerging to the world. As I mentioned, the 2007-2008 financial crisis, I didn't really know any of that stuff at the time. I didn't know much about government or any conspiracies. I grew up in the punk music community, and we just hated government just for the sake of it. I didn't have any philosophical, you know, like grounding for it. I was just like, yeah, F authority, I don't like them, but I didn't know much beyond that. But it was interesting because at that time, October 2008, this is the month before Obama became president. And all I remember is that people either thought this guy was going to be the Antichrist or he was going to be the savior of the world. And I'm just like, I don't know what the heck's going on. I'm just navigating this new world. I'm getting out. My mind is open. I'm happy about things. And I started going to the library all the time because as a felon, I was spending a lot of time applying for jobs. And one day at the library, I decided to read a book. I decided to use my brain again. And I saw this book called Cannabis, A History. And it was the first book I ever voluntarily took notes on without being assigned to do so. And it's not a glorification of the cannabis plant, and it's also not reefer madness propaganda, drugs are bad. It was just a really objective look at the legal impact of the cannabis plant, the cultural impact, the sociological impact, and so on and so forth. And it was this book that first taught me about the fact that the drug laws in the United States, the first drug laws like the Harrison Act of 1914, were largely based on racism towards black jazz musicians, Chinese migrant workers, Mexican migrant workers, and also that the oil industry was afraid that this whole hemp thing would be a useful fuel, and they wanted to make it illegal, so they lobbied to get drug laws passed. And all this is new to me at the time. I'm just like, what the heck? I was never taught this in high school or the little bit of college I managed to do. And that's when the light bulb went off. That's when I started thinking, maybe there's other things about the world that I was not taught, that there's more to this reality that I've been thinking while I was distracted in my depression and my drug use. And so this is early 2009, and as I shared with you guys, I read the book, watched the documentary, heard Ron Paul speak, and started the activism, and I continued on from there. But I share that with you guys so you understand why I call my website, my book series, this movement, if you will, the conscious resistance. Because to me, it's the bringing together of those two worlds, right? Like that's, I think, is ultimately what we have to do. It's not just about the physical piece of the puzzle, it's also the internal, spiritual, mental, psychological. And let me give you an example of this. You know, when I got out of prison and I started to question things and wake up, I got into the activism, but I also continued my spiritual journey. I was going to the Houston Zen Center, I was going to different meditations and drum circles and consciousness events and starting to explore myself. I tried ayahuasca, all these kind of things. But for the first couple years, I was basically living a double life because I had my activist friends and I had my spiritual friends. And a lot of the activists that I met at that time were kind of libertarian, anarchist types who were very logical, rational people. There's nothing wrong with logic and rational thought, but they were so far on that side that they had no interest in the world beyond the five senses, the internal world. So, you know, we would be at the protests, the rallies, we'd be holding our signs, yelling at the Federal Reserve, hoping the building would crumble from our yelling and screaming. And we're out in the street holding the signs, and I'd say, guys, you want to come to this meditation this weekend? And they say, what are you talking about, hippie? What kind of weird stuff is that? They just sort of dismiss me, or I'd say something like we're holding the sign, maybe I'd say something like, hey guys, have you ever thought, maybe we're all God. Maybe we're just like reflections of each other. I'd get up on some tangent and say, what are you talking about, man? Are you high? And I'd say, I am high, but what does that have to do with anything? And then I'd go to my meditation friends and my spiritual friends, and I'd tell them, guys, did you hear about this latest police shooting? Have you seen this bad bill they're trying to pass? Have you seen what they're spraying in the skies? And they'd say, don't talk about it. You're going to manifest it. Only good vibes here, no bad vibes. And so my spiritual friends didn't want to hear about the political stuff and the things I was starting to wake up to, and my activist friends didn't want to hear about the other side. So for those first couple years, I just lived this double life. Okay, I'll do that, I'll do this, but they'll never cross over. And then in 2013, I had one of these nights, maybe you guys can relate to, where, you know, you're up till 4 in the morning watching YouTube videos, and I think I was watching a David Icke video, and that's when this phrase was given to me, it was whispered to me, the conscious resistance. And that's when I realized I could not live this double life anymore, that to me, these were two sides of the same coin. I like to explain the conscious resistance as the realization, the recognition, the understanding that the struggle for a more free, ethical, and just world will not come from only confronting the physical institutions of power. Yes, let's know the names, the places, the dates, as far as that serves you, but that's only one half of the puzzle. There's also the other side, which is what I call our struggle against our own internal tyrant. Our doubts, our fears, our insecurities, and our limiting beliefs, which can hold us back and prevent us from being the best version of ourselves. And I don't know about you guys, but I believe Creator, universe, whatever word you want to use, is calling on us to be the best versions of ourselves right now. Is saying, like, step up. This is your moment. We're ready for your gifts. The world needs you right now. Share whatever you've got, right? So to me, that's what the conscious resistance is. It's bringing those two things together. Because as I said, some people get the names and the places and the economics and everything, but then they're completely, you know, ignoring this side. Then you got the other people who are all into the prayer and the meditation, but they're floating in 5D and they don't have their feet on the ground, right? You have to find that balance. That's what the conscious resistance is for me, and that's basically the path I've been on, and that's directly informed by my experiences of going to prison and doing my own trauma healing, and that, as I said, that's a journey that continues to this day.
Conscious resistance.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. So I just wanted to share that as we get into this talk, so you guys understand really the foundation that I'm coming from. So as I continued on my activist journey, and we started to, the Houston Freethinkers, we started to really become known in Houston. Like, we were building a cultural movement. In fact, the first shirts we ever made, it said the Houston Freethinkers, making it cool to give a shit since 2010. Because that was really our goal. I was in my early 20s, we had people in the 30s, 40s, and 50s and above, but we were trying to create a cultural movement that people wanted to be a part of. Especially because, you know, sometimes when you're younger, it's cool to not give a, you know, it's like, oh, that's boring. Who wants to actually be about something? Let's just get drunk and party and be, you know, that's what's cool sometimes, especially for me growing up around a lot of other punks who thought that, you know, they would spray paint anarchy A's and they had no idea what it meant. They just wanted to drink 40s and party, right? Yeah. To me, I wanted to do more than that, right? So we were really trying to build a cultural movement. That's why we did art events and music events. And we started throwing this festival called For the Community. And I basically got a lot of the bands that I knew. We got 30 bands, and we basically said, free party, 30 bands, all different genres, come out, come hang out. And people would come out, and while they were there, we'd say, hey, we're with the Houston Freethinkers, check us out, come to our meetings, here's a flyer, here's a DVD. Back then when we were passing out DVDs. And she just tried to recruit people, basically use the party as a way to get them into what we were doing. And so the first time we did this was January 2012, the very first For the Community, and 400 people showed up. We were completely overwhelmed, did not expect it. It was like, whoa, okay, this is a success. And allegedly, somebody called the cops for a noise complaint. We never found out if it was accurate, but all we know is that the cops showed up 10 cars deep. And long story short, they ended up arresting me. If anybody remembers around that time of Occupy, a lot of people were doing mic checks. Mic check, you know, like calling out. So they came in and grabbed me, took me to the streets. They had me on the hood of a cop car. I'm like, mic check. This is what a police state looks like. And everybody's chanting it and doing it. That pissed them off a little bit. And so even though it wasn't illegal, it just got them upset. And I got arrested for failure to obey a lawful order from an officer, which is just an excuse. They use that whenever they have no reason to arrest you, but they want to arrest you. So they arrested me. They grabbed one of my buddies who was a veteran of the Iraq War of the 1990s, slammed his face on the hood of the cop car. One of the cops pulls out a shotgun, turns around, cocks it, points it at a crowd of 100 unarmed people and says, get back now! And when I got out of jail the next day, we collected all those videos, And I'd gotten pretty good by this point at writing press releases and getting media attention. So we edited the videos together, we wrote up a press release, and I sent it out to all the local media. Within an hour, they were all at my apartment. I'm just living like, downtown Houston life, young activists, and all the media, local Fox, ABC, NBC, all the stations show up. And they came over, and they were real friendly. They shook my hand. So sorry to hear about what happened to you. Tell us what your story is. And I told them the story. We played them the video. And this was probably my first lesson in how the media actually operates. Like, generally speaking, I knew that, the New York Times and others, they lied us into the Iraq War, and obviously we saw them lying during COVID. But sometimes people forget that even your own local media can be full of it too, and they can lie as well, right? This was one of those examples, because they came over and they were so friendly, and they wanted to hear the story. And then later that night and the next day, when they published their videos and the articles, they said, "Local group of conspiracy theorists surrounds the Houston police." Literally, that was the headline, like, we're surrounding the cops. And but the video's going viral across the city. The HPD actually ended up calling me and my buddy, who they slammed on the hood of the car downtown. They interviewed us. HPD announced that they were investigating it. And you guys might be surprised, but they investigated themselves, and they found out they did nothing wrong. So everything was good. And this was actually the first time I was... Yeah, it was all good. Everything was fine. This was actually the first time I got on Alex Jones's show way back in the day, when it was a different Alex Jones. Interpret that however you like. This was 2011, and so we started to get known in the Houston and Texas community. People knew who the Houston freethinkers were, and a lot of activists also respected us, because even though the cops were being aggressive, we didn't meet them with violence, but we also didn't cower. We stood strong, and everybody stood up like, no, this is wrong, what are you guys doing? And so it really started to get us a name in Houston. It also started to get me on the radar of the Houston police. I would be out in the streets, and again, at this time I'm living in the city, downtown life, just biking everywhere I go, and I'd be at a protest or even just walking the streets, and a cop would walk by me and say, "How you doing, Derek?" Just random cops. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I didn't really know what to make of it. Part of me was a little nervous, because I'm still pretty fresh out of prison and right off parole, and I'm like, I'm not going back. But I wasn't doing anything illegal, so I just continued on. We kept doing our good works, and we continued to raise our profile. A couple of months after that, I was sent an email by another independent journalist in Texas, and she said, I had a source within the Houston Police Department reach out to me, and he said, if you know Derek Brose, you should pass this information along to him. And this anonymous source within the police department sent an email that she sent to me, and it said that I had a criminal intelligence officer assigned to me from the Houston Police Department. Basically, they were surveying me, they were monitoring me. And again, I didn't really know what quite to make of it. I thought, okay, this is kind of weird. Part of me was like, okay, I guess I'm doing my job right if they're watching me, But I was also kind of nervous, like I hadn't done anything illegal, but they're saying I'm under surveillance. I continued on, and then the next year in 2012, we had another big success. I think probably my greatest achievement as an activist in terms of street activism. One thing about being an activist is you typically get used to losing a lot. What I mean by that is you sign the petition, you go to the city council meeting, you chant and yell on the street, you bullhorn, and they do it anyways. They sign the contract, they build the building, whatever it is you're fighting. They tend to just ignore you. And now I want to do say real quick, what I'm describing there is mainly street activism, which I think is important, and there's a time and a place when the people need to get out and express themselves, and it feels good just to exercise your voice. But I also these days tend to see that as kind of reactive activism, you know what I mean? Like, they did something bad over here, let's rush over here and protest it. They did something bad over here, let's rush over here and protest it. We're still letting them control our energy, dictate our attention. And not to say there aren't things that don't deserve people getting out in the streets, but I tend to see that as more reactive activism. And when I talk about activism, I tend to use the broadest definition of that. When I talk about activism, I think activism is the way you raise your kids. It's the way you communicate with other people. It's the way you live your life. And I tend to think we're all activists. Some of us are just more active than others. But at this time, we were mainly focused on reactive activism, but we were doing the street activism. And as I said, you get used to losing. But we had this huge victory that was so powerful, and it also got us on the radar of the Houston Police. Basically, in April 2012, the Houston Police Department, the Department of Homeland Security, the feds, they came to Houston, and they had a press conference, and they announced a new program called Operation Bus Safe. Now, if you think about this time in 2012, this is a decade after 9/11. So the big fear then was terrorists. Terrorists are hiding in every bush. They're coming to get you. So we got to take away your rights and keep you safe. So the government announced that they were starting a new pilot program in Houston, which was going to involve checking the IDs, the purses, and the bags of every single person who chose to ride public transportation, to keep you safe, of course. Now, when we saw this, we're like, okay, this is a total violation of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. This is not happening in our community. So we quickly organized, we sent out press releases to the media, and we said, we're going to the next Metro Board meeting, we're going to show up, and we're going to express our voices. And these kind of meetings typically are just a bunch of old guys sitting around talking to themselves. Nobody shows up. All of a sudden, we show up with 50 people and cameras, and we're giving speeches one after the other. People are quoting Benjamin Franklin, freedom versus security. We're doing the whole thing. And they were completely overwhelmed. They said, guys, we weren't prepared for this. We're going to set another meeting in 2 weeks to just focus on this program. As far as we were concerned, that meant 2 more weeks to get even more organized. So we came back with even more people. We brought attorneys. We brought even more media attention. And by the end of that meeting, at the end of April 2012, they announced that they were shutting down the program and they'd never brought it back to Houston in the last 14 years. As far as I know, well, I didn't even mention like the worst part of it. It's like I said, they're checking your bags and stuff, but the people that were going to be checking your bags was those nice people who groped you at the airport, the TSA. They were going to take them from the airport and bring them to the buses to check out everybody's bags and stuff. So by the end of this meeting, we just had this huge victory. And we didn't have to go vote for it. We didn't have to beg. We just went straight to them and expressed how frustrated we are. It also didn't hurt that the lawyers were threatening to sue them. They said, please do this so we can sue you for Fourth Amendment violations. But the point is, by the end of that meeting, we kicked the feds out of our town. A bunch of ragtag activists in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, we just won. And I remember just looking around like, we actually did that? As I said, you get used to losing, but when you have a morale boost like that, it's like, yeah, okay, that's real people power. And that was such a beautiful moment. But it also, again, had the impact of getting me on the radar of the Houston police even further. So first I find out that I'm allegedly under surveillance and that I have an officer assigned to me. And the thing about that is at that time, as I mentioned, I was biking around Houston. So I'm guessing they had a cop in his car following me around as I went from community garden to protests to city council meeting and just wasting their taxpayer dollars. But after that, a couple months after we had this huge victory, I was sent another message from a completely different source that was also telling me that the Houston Police Department was watching me. But not only were they watching me, this police officer said that they were holding training sessions on me and the Houston Freethinkers. And this cop said, we were made to attend training sessions about Derrick Rose and the Houston Freethinkers, and they made them sound like they're this violent militant group, but I looked them up, and all they're doing is building community gardens and raising money for charity. He said, you should let him know. And not only did he say that, he sent a picture of the training session. So you could see like a classroom space with a bunch of cops in it, and in the front of the room you saw a screen, and the screen said Houston Freethinkers with a picture of me. And the cop sitting in the back of the room was kind enough to take a picture and then leak it, and eventually it found its way to me. So, of course, when this happens, now it's like, okay, I'm under surveillance, they're having meetings about what we're doing. We weren't doing anything illegal, but I started taking it to the mayor, to the police chief. I started confronting them about it. They all denied it. They claimed, I was just making it up. But what it did have the impact of doing is I figured, look, if I'm under surveillance, I should probably become an expert in what that means to be under surveillance. And this was really the beginning of a lot of my local journalism in Houston. I started filing open records requests with the Houston Police Department and the city of Houston to find out what tools do they have available to them, right? Like I was kind of aware about surveillance at that time. Old school stuff, like they can tap your home phone, they can go through your mail. But if you remember in 2013, that's when Edward Snowden started to leak his documents about NSA surveillance. So I was like, okay, I need to know what sort of tools do they have available. I started learning about drone surveillance tools, cops flying drones and watching people over the city. I started learning about automatic license plate readers, which you guys are probably learning more about recently under the name Flock. That technology has been around for over a decade. At that time, the biggest company was called Vigilant Solutions. I started learning about something called cell site simulators, also known as Stingrays. This is basically a laptop-sized tool that they can use to steal all the data on your phone. And what it does is it tricks your phone to thinking it's a cell tower, and when your phone connects to it, it takes your text, your images, all your metadata. Now, they promise this is only used to catch bad guys. So for example, let's imagine they were looking for a criminal somewhere in this area, and they had his number, and they knew he was somewhere in this 10-mile radius, and they're just driving around, and they're pinging his number, just waiting for it to connect. But it's not targeted. In the process of driving around, it's scooping up the data of all the phones that it comes across. Now, most police departments have a policy where they say they delete this data after 30 days. They promise they would never use it against you. Trust them as much as you like. So I started learning about that. I started learning about gait detection. You guys know what gait detection is? Your gait is the way you walk, and we all have a very unique walk. So these cameras can scan your body as you walk and move, and once they have your gait profile, they can spot you out of a crowd of 1,000 people within a moment or two. Started learning about that. I also started learning about this one tool that some police departments have. It kind of looks like a giant gun, and basically they can aim it at a building and see through the walls and see how many heat signatures are in there. Again, they claim it's just to catch bad guys. They'll never use it against you. And I also started to learn about something called facial recognition, which I'm sure more and more of you are aware of, because facial recognition has exploded over the last decade. As I was learning about this was back in 2014, 15, and 16, and it was not as pervasive as it is now. Now, of course, it's at the airport. It's still optional, by the way. They don't like to tell you that, and the signs are about this big. You barely see them, and by that point, you've already scanned your face. Just stand to the side and hand them your ID. You know, they're not going to tell you ahead of time. It's optional now, but who knows how long that's going to last. But as I was learning about this 10 years ago, I was starting to discover activist organizations, digital privacy organizations that I would consider to be much more expert than myself, like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Electronic Privacy Information Center, and I was finding these lawyers who 10 years ago were warning that facial recognition was posing a very dangerous threat to our privacy. And they were calling for a moratorium, for a temporary ban. They were saying, if this technology continues to go forward unchecked, it will be the end of privacy. And in 2017, a lot of these attorneys and groups came together and they signed this letter and they sent it to Congress and nobody paid attention, basically saying, we need to stop, we need to slow down, put some checks and balances in place. You might be surprised to find out that Illinois is the only state in the entire country that has any kind of privacy protections for your biometrics. That means your fingerprints, your DNA, your face. Illinois is the only one that has a protection like that. That means even here in Florida, private corporations, governments, anybody could be scanning your face. This is called your face print. And they can take that face print and they can store it in a database. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be watching your every move. They might sell it to a corporation who's trying to sell you more ads. It could be used for all kinds of things. The point is there's no protections in place. And I'm not somebody who generally calls for government protections as if that's going to fix things, but I will say facial recognition does pose a very unique threat to our privacy, just the way it's being used. You can look to countries like China where they've had their systems installed for decades now, and they can find any citizen within a matter of, I saw one report 5 years ago that said they can find anyone in the country within 5 minutes. I would imagine it's even faster now because of how pervasive their facial recognition cameras are. Not only that, these attorneys were also warning that the combination of facial recognition with this then little-known tool called artificial intelligence were going to pose an even more unique threat. Now, of course, AI is everywhere now, and it's much more pervasive. Obviously, it's a tool. It can be used for different reasons, like our brother over here was sharing, but it can also be used to build a surveillance grid, and it is definitely being used in that way. So as I'm discovering all this information, which started with me finding out I was under surveillance, it started to lead me to ask the question, if people like us who value bodily autonomy, individual liberty, and privacy, how do people like us stay free in a world that is very rapidly shifting in this direction? Also at this time, I was starting to do a lot of research in local activism in Houston on 5G. Not only 5G related to the EMF concerns, but 5G and 6G are really the backbone of this entire surveillance grid they're trying to build. Like, who's heard of the Internet of Things? The Internet of Bodies? The Internet of Bio-Nano Things? These are very interesting concepts that go deep down the rabbit hole, but the point is, that whole world that they're pushing us towards is backed by this technology. And back then in 2018, there was the race to 5G. We got to beat China there. We got to be the first ones to get it there. And now we're kind of hearing the same thing with AI. The race to AI, we got to get there before China does. And I don't know about you guys, but I was never asked if that's even the future I want. It just seems like it's assumed that we all want to live in that world. Obviously, you're here because you probably don't want that vision they have for the future, the Great Reset, all the stuff they've talked about, right? But that was the question that eventually led me to writing my book, which we just ran out of last night, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. I will mention you can get it online for those who don't have it. You can also download it for free on my website, and you can listen to the free audiobook. It's at theconsciousresistance.com, which is my website, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, and you can find the book there. So as I'm asking these questions, as I'm learning about this technology, that's what I was focused on. What is somebody like me going to do if this world can't be stopped? I think we should push back and resist where we can, but let's also be real. There's nearly every single government in the world working on this push towards what they call the Great Reset now. Multinational corporations, groups like the Bilderberg Group and all the other names I'm sure you know, trillions of dollars invested into this world. If we can't stop it, perhaps we should have a plan on how we're going to thrive outside of it. And that's what I started focusing on, is what I call exit and build. That's where I first started describing this. I published the book in January 2020. which is either the best or the worst time to publish a book, because a month later, COVID happened, and in my case, it worked out pretty good. My book has nothing to do with alleged pandemics or alleged viruses or any of that stuff, but everything we saw from COVID is exactly what I was describing in the book. The push to use technology in a way to try to control and socially engineer the world. And think about what we saw and what we heard during COVID. Trust the experts. That comes directly from a technocratic philosophy. So my book is part history on the technocracy movement, which started in the US and Canada in the 1930s and 40s. And just really briefly, it was basically a movement of people who said that the people are too dumb to know what's good for them. So we should abolish voting and, constitutional republics and democracy, get rid of that. And also, the business people are too greedy, so we should abolish the market system, and instead we should have the technocrats, the experts, the engineers, the scientists, run society. They were going to micromanage society and allocate resources. They promised it would be a perfect utopia. And at the time when they were writing this 100 years ago, they said they were going to do this with the machines. In 2026, the machines are AI. And the thing is, if you go to Wikipedia right now, Wikipedia will tell you that this philosophy basically died in the 1950s and, it was just forgotten about. The reality is it never died. In 1970, people like Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Trilateral Commission, they revived it, and it continues on to this day. Interesting fact, Elon Musk's grandfather, Joshua Hazelman, was a part of the original technocracy movement in the 1930s in Canada. So the book is part of history of that movement, looking at how these people are shaping our world. COVID showed it firsthand. Trust the experts, contact tracing, vaccine passports, immunity passports, using the technological systems to social engineer compliance. If you're one of those crazy people who like posting about horse paste on the internet, you might get censored. If you're one of those people that won't stop posting conspiracy theories, your bank account might get shut down, right? And as I said earlier, if you don't want to comply, sorry, you can't work here anymore. Sorry, you can't travel anymore, right? What's important to note is that the way tyranny has operated for the past couple hundred years is with violence, with a gun. Look at any totalitarian regime of the last 100 years, be it communist, fascist, or otherwise, and there was a gun in the room, very visibly. Get against the wall, and we'll kill you. Go to the labor camps, listen to us, or you'll be, worked to death. You'll be killed. In our world, the gun is removed, and instead it's a digital cage that's a lot more subtle and a lot more invisible to most people who don't see that the more dependent you are on these systems, they don't have to put a gun to your head. They can just lock you out of society until you comply. They can just coerce you subtly. And as I shared earlier, there was people I met during COVID 1984 who didn't want the shot, but because they didn't have any other way to operate, they complied. So as I started to think about this, and then I published the book, I realized that to me the answer is to get out of their systems as much as possible. Easier said than done. I want to make it clear as we go further into this next part here that I know what I'm advocating for is not simple, not easy, not going to happen overnight. And I hope that's okay with you guys, because the reality is that we've been sold a lie that multi-generational lasting liberty happens overnight. And that's what I'm aiming for. I'm not just aiming to be free for myself. I'm aiming to be free so your kids are free, and so your grandchildren are free, and so this outlives us. That takes effort, time, money, energy. The lie we've been told is that all you have to do is press a button every 2 to 4 years, outsource your power to someone else, and that'll get you freedom. That's a lie. Or that all we have to do is just use violence and force people to be free. But what I'm here to tell you guys is I don't believe that those are the solutions. I'm not here to advocate politics, and I think most of you probably are on some similar level to that. I did run for mayor of Houston in 2019-2023, but not because I had some foolish belief that I was somehow going to get elected and fix everything. I just sort of learned that Derek Bros, local conspiracy theorist, doesn't get invited to the same places that Derek Bros, local candidate for mayor, does, which is stupid in itself, but it opened up doors that I was able to spread this same message. All of a sudden, I'm getting invited to high schools, to old folks' homes, to Democrat groups, Republican groups, to rich neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, white neighborhoods, black neighborhoods. I'm getting invited to 5 a.m. morning shows, to the newspaper and the radio, to talk this same message. And so, other than to do things like that, I don't see value in the political system. If you do feel the need to vote and get involved, I would say get as hyper-local as possible. I know, for example, a lot of people fighting data centers and FLOP and stuff like that. You can fight that, especially in a smaller area like this. You got involved in your city council, your town council, your county commissioner court, your school board. You can stop some of those policies. So I'm not here to tell you don't do that if you find value in that. But I hope by now most people are seeing that thinking that a president's going to come save you is just a waste of time. And hopefully, if you fell for the Trump deception, you've gotten the help you need, and you're beyond that. But I will give you fair warning. I'll give you fair warning. People are already casting a third party in 2028. That'll fix it. Put more of your money and time and energy into the system. We promise it's going to work this time. I would advise you against that. But hey, even if you want to vote, here's the thing. You can vote. You can do that. And I would encourage you to try this exit and build thing I'm talking about tonight. So vote in one hand, exit and build the other. And the next couple of years, see which one of those has brought you more value to your life. I feel pretty confident which one's going to disappoint you and which one's not. So I'm not here to advocate political solutions. I also, as I said, do not believe violence is the answer. I don't think we just need to storm the Capitol and force everybody to believe like us. That's not the way to be free. People have to find freedom in their own hearts and their own minds. And as much as we might want the people around us who we love to give a crap, until they're ready, that's their own time, that's their own place. Like we're talking about cognitive dissonance, all we can do is plant seeds. Violence isn't the answer. Even if we thought it was the answer, I don't think it's a smart strategy tactically. I think it probably won't go the way we would hope for. So I'm not here to advocate for political solutions, for violence, which kind of are the same thing in some ways. And I'm also definitely not here to advocate for apathy. Apathy and nihilism seem to have become quite popular the last 5 years on the internet. Who's heard of blackpilling? Doomer, things like this, right? This idea, these are the people on the internet, and I meet them a lot in the wilds of the internet, because if you talk about solutions, people love to crap on your solutions and say, oh, that'll never work. Like, for example, when I talk about growing food, people say, you really think they're going to let you grow your own food? Have you ever heard of Waco? They're just going to come kill you. Have you seen what they're doing in Gaza? Have you seen them spraying the skies? And sure, are those real concerns? Absolutely. I'm not here to sell you a lie. Are there bad people out there in government and elsewhere who want to stop free people from operating? 100%. But what does that mean? Should we not even bother because one day bad people might try to come stop us? I guess the solution to the black pillars is just to post memes all day and complain on the internet. That doesn't feel like enough for me personally. I don't want to just watch the world get worse through a screen and then one day it shows up at my door. Because the thing is, you can be all awake and look at me, I'm so informed, I'm so much smarter than everybody. But if you ain't doing nothing about it, one day they're going to say, hello, sir, welcome to the FEMA camp. Welcome on in. Or welcome to the digital control grid, because you didn't do anything about it. You just complained on the internet and thought you were better than everybody and smarter than everybody. So I'm definitely not here to advocate for apathy. Instead, this is where exit and build comes in. And one of the ways I like to explain exit and build, the simplest way probably, is just the idea of voting with your dollar, but applied to every area of your life, right? So you guys understand the idea of voting with your dollar, right? So you don't like McDonald's, don't give them your money. You don't like Monsanto, don't buy Roundup. Instead, spend your money at local businesses or entrepreneurs and people you support. Easy concept. I think we should all be doing that. Exit and build is that concept, but instead of just applied economically, it's about applying that to every area of your life, right? So the first step is to start to look at the systems you're involved in. Education system, healthcare system, food system, so on and so forth. And what I call this is taking a holistic self-assessment. This is basically what I did for myself in prison. It's also the name of one of my other books you can download for free. It's called The Holistic Self-Assessment. And it starts with first getting to know yourself a little deeper, getting to know the principles and values you hold. Because this is one thing, is how can you know if you are out of alignment with your principles if you don't even know what your principles are? And the reason I focus on principles so much is because I think that's one of the biggest problems in our world, is that people are allowing evil to happen because they refuse to live in line themselves. And for example, for these young kids, how can we model the better world if we're not living it ourselves, right? We can tell them, hey, don't do the bad things. But if they watch us do the bad things, they watch us participate in evil systems, it's kind of hard to model that for them. So for me, the answer is get to know yourself, get to know your principles, and then start to look at your habits, your relationships, and your goals and see, am I out of alignment? So for me, one of the most important principles to me that I think you probably would agree with is sometimes known as the non-aggression principle, the golden rule. I like to just call it sovereignty of the individual. And all that means is that you are a beautiful, powerful, free person. You own your body, you own the products of your labor, and that it's wrong, immoral, unethical for me to force you to do what I want, right? And if you reflect that back to me, and we recognize that in each other, we can do some beautiful things. You know, we don't have to agree on everything. I don't have to agree on your diet. I don't have to agree on your lifestyle, who you love, where you live, or anything like that. As long as we agree not to use force, fraud, violence, and coercion against each other, we can do some great things. So for me, everything I do springs from that. When I'm making my choices, if something I'm doing or thinking of doing is not in line with that, I take a different path, right? Because so everything I do has to spring from that. And I think if we all adopted that, we'd be in a better place. So you get to know your principles. There's other principles you might have as well. And then you start to look at your habits, look at your relationships, and see where there are areas of where you're out of alignment. Let me make it even more simple. Imagine that you are trying to get the beach body you want to feel good to go to the beach later this summer, something like that, something real simple, right? But then you look at your habits, and your daily habits are playing video games and eating pizza all day. Your habits are out of alignment with the goal you have. Just that simple. Kind of hard to imagine how you're going to get to the goal without putting some effort and changing those daily habits. So now imagine your goal is to live in a free world with free-range kids and clean food and, and like-minded people and so on and so forth, but you look at your habits and your relationships, not just relationships with people, but relationships with the systems you're participating in, and you see that you're out of alignment. How are you going to get to the goal if you're not in alignment, right? So that, for me, is what's most important. It has to start with ourselves. We have to model that. So I'm going to give you a few examples of this exit and build idea, and then I'm going to share with you guys what I've been doing as I've been exiting and building. So let's start with the technology. For those who were here and you heard Manish talk about open source technology, I'm going to pick up on that thread for a moment. First, let's talk about the problems with the mainstream technological big tech systems. Manish touched on earlier about Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where they harvested a bunch of people's data and they used it in the 2016 election. Well, have you guys ever heard of, or anybody remember, Google's original motto?
Yeah. First, do no harm.
Do no harm.
Don't be evil.
Don't be evil.
Don't be evil. That was their original motto back in the early days of Google. Now, if you go to google.com right now, guys, guess what? It don't say don't be evil anymore. I think probably about 5 to 10 years into their business model, they were having a meeting. They looked around at each other like, guys, we're evil. We probably should take that down. So that tells you a little something about their moral code. They're not concerned about not being evil. But let me give you another example. When Google wanted to enter into business with China, as every business who wants to go into business with China, they have to pretty much do whatever the government says in order to operate there. There's 1 billion people in China. Businesses want that customer base, and Google wanted access to that customer base. So the Chinese government said, if you want to do business here, you have to build a censored version of your search engine. Why? Because the Chinese government doesn't want young Chinese citizens to go search Tiananmen Square, for example, and find out about the history of that. So now when they go search Tiananmen Square, it says, sorry, we have no search results for you. Google was willing to do that, and they operate in China. Tells you, again, a little bit about their moral code and what they believe in. Who's heard of Apple's Foxconn facility? One of the biggest Apple facilities that's building your phones and laptops and things like that. This is a mega complex where people work 12 to 15 hours a day, and it's basically a city that they live, they never leave. And about a decade ago, people started committing suicide because of the horrible conditions, jumping out of the factory. And what was Apple's solution? It wasn't pay them better, give them less hours. It was, let's install suicide nets to catch them if they fall. Look it up, Foxconn, suicide nets. That's just one example of sort of the ethics of that company. And we could go on and on, Microsoft and others. I think you guys get the point. Now, Amazon factories, I mean, these big tech companies, they don't care about us. They see us as a product. They don't care about your privacy. And yet, probably everybody here is using one of their products or more. Why? On one hand, it's because they've monopolized the marketplace. If you go to any local electronics store, what are you going to find? Google, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, so on and so forth, right? And not to mention that companies like Google, Meta, and a few others, Oracle, they actually received seed funding from the CIA. So it kind of, that's how they got the monopoly, because they were funded by the intelligence networks. But so they have a monopoly on the big tech arena, but also, let's be real, we're creatures of convenience. We do what's easy. We do what's right in front of us. And most of your devices are built with Microsoft in them, or Google in them, or any other number of companies. So we do what is easy, what is right in front of us. But the reality is, my friends, there are options. Let's imagine you're in this situation and you're looking at this and you're like, I don't want to support that Foxconn suicide net company. I don't want to support Google and these things they're in. So you recognize that doesn't line up with your principles. You decide you want to take steps to exit from that systems and build new systems. Now, in this case, I'm saying building, exit and build is the phrase, but the reality is most of us aren't technologists like Manish. Some of you may be, but I'm not. I'm not a developer, coder, technologist. I'm just the loudmouth that shouts about these tools and tries to get more people to use them. So if you're not going to be the builder, then support those who are building them, right? So in this case, Manish, his website is Sovereign Tech Services. I'm going to give you guys a couple of resources here now if you want to actually try to go down this journey of getting off big tech in terms of your operating systems, in terms of your browsers, email, so on and so forth. You guys, I think, have the flyers for one of our sponsors. It's Above Phone. I know Manish touched on that. I just want to mention again, because they did give us a $50 off coupon for anybody who might want to get one of their phones or laptops. It's good for the next 3 days, and it's just Tampa. Let me double check. It might be Tampa Bay. Tampa 50. And they sell you laptops and phones that have been de-Googled. Sorry if you're on Apple, because they basically built a system that is completely, you can't crack Apple. They got their stuff locked down. So Android is a lot easier to de-Google and to strip and to get rid of all the spyware. Tampa Bay 50 is the code. The number 50, just in case anybody wants a $50 off discount. So AbovePhone.com, they sell out-of-the-box laptops and phones that are preloaded with apps that are open source, decentralized, privacy-based. They have everything that you normally use, but a private version of it. So for example, instead of Google Maps or Apple Maps, there's Organic Maps, there's Magic Earth. Instead of YouTube, there's NewPipe, there's FreeTube, there's CleanTube. Instead of using Spotify and Apple to stream all your music or your podcast, you can use something like AntennaPod, which allows you to listen to any of the podcasts you want, including my own, but you also get to download it instead of paying these people every month. Because by the way, in case you haven't recognized, my friends, the subscription model is part of the you will own nothing and be happy. They don't want you to own physical music. They don't want you to own physical movies. Just pay us for the rest of your life every month, and we promise all the movies you want will be there until they're not. So owning things is a positive thing in terms of downloading things or putting on your devices. My point is there is literally an alternative to every single thing you're using. Google Sheets, Google Drive, Microsoft Teams, so on and so forth. I know Manish mentioned Nextcloud. I'm going to give you a couple other resources. So AbovePhone.com, that's where you can check out their phones and devices. They also sell VPNs, emails. They have a great customer service. They're a small team of like 10 to 15 people. So, you know, they're really just striving to provide the tools that people like us are looking for so that we can actually use digital tools, but do it in alignment with our values. AbovePhone also runs a project called Take Back Our Tech. TakeBackOurTech.org is the website. And this is basically just a website that gives you resources and guides on how to take some of these steps. So for example, if you wanted to get off your Apple operating system or your Google operating system or your Microsoft operating system and switch over to Linux, who's heard of Linux? A few of you, who's made the jump? A couple people, awesome, sweet. It's not as challenging or intimidating as it might feel. It can feel that way, but once you do it, it's like, oh my God, why did I take so long? This is basically, yeah, you got to learn a new tool because it doesn't look exactly the way you might be used to using if you're using these alternative tools. But at the end of the day, it's pretty simple, right? So I run on my laptop Linux Mint, and I use the browser I'm using is LibreWolf, which is basically a privacy max version of Firefox that blocks all trackers and ads and things like that. So TakeBackOurTech.org, they have a bunch of guides, visual guides, written guides, and videos and images that'll make it as simple as possible for you. Another couple websites, one is called privacytools.io, privacytools.io, and libertytools.io. And these are basically, I don't know these people directly, these are just, you know, resources I've found. One other one that's a little bit older but might be some value is just nomooregoogle.com. And the same thing you'll find on that is we'll just say email. Here's a bunch of alternative emails. VPNs, here's a bunch of alternative VPNs. Do your own research. I'm not telling you which ones to use, but if you're interested in starting the journey, these are some resources you can start with. And I get that this can be intimidating. You might be, I'm sure plenty of you are doing great work, and you're on Gmail, or you're on Google Drive, you're on Microsoft Teams, you're like, dang it, Derek, I got all my contacts in there, and I got to switch all this stuff. But let's be real. If your line in the sand is, well, I want this freedom thing, but I don't want to change my Gmail. That sounds like a lot of work. Never mind. Maybe you don't really want to be in line with your values, right? But it might take some time. It's okay. Give yourself a couple of weeks or a couple of months if it takes it. Don't beat yourself up. Start the new thing and slowly transition over. That's what Exit and Build is about. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a process, right? Here I am, totally plugged into big tech. My vision is to be supporting open source privacy companies. Well, that's going to take some time. So you start to transition, and before you know it, you're there, just like with anything else. So Take Back Our Tech, AbovePhone.com, privacytools.io, libertytools.io, nomooregoogle.com, and one more time, Manish's website is sovereigntechservices.com. Now let's talk about food for a moment. The food systems, I think you guys probably all here understand. I mean, we're blessed to be giving this talk in a food forest where Corey and Ryan and others here are working on some great projects, and I think it's the perfect location to have this. But just for a moment, in case anybody hasn't come to the realization of why you don't want to be dependent on the big box grocery stores, filled with glyphosate, filled with GMOs. Did anybody have a local grocery store, maybe not here, but maybe so in some places, that required masks to get in? Independent stores, I know it was less likely in Florida. There were some places, part of the world, where people even were required to show proof of vaccine just to get in. So not only is it not a good idea to not be dependent on those things because of how toxic they are, how toxic those food systems are, you also should think, and I don't think it's a far-off scenario to imagine that if and when digital IDs come into place, that some of these businesses would require them in order to enter, the more mandatory they become. So it's just a good idea to be less dependent on those systems. But let's be real, 90% of us are dependent on the big box grocery stores. That's what most of the Western world is doing. What are some things you can do? You can get involved in places like this. You can do community garden, urban farming, community-supported agriculture. You can go to farmers markets and get to know the people who grow the food. Whatever your diet is, whether you eat plants or you eat meat, it's important to get closer to your diet because the current food system is destructive to the animals, to the plants, to the planet, to us, to the soil, to the waterways, and so on and so forth. We can do better. And the answer is permaculture. The answer is localization of food, decentralization of the food supply. But let's also be real. As with the tech thing, we're not all going to be the developers and the coders. And maybe some of you are like, Derek, I don't want to be a farmer. That's not my role. That's okay. Not everybody needs to do that. Personally, I do think there's some value to putting your hands in the soil and planting some seeds and growing a plant and harvesting it and taking it in the kitchen and cooking it for people you love. There's something magical, maybe even spiritual there. But it's okay if that's not your path. Then support those who are doing those things. Get to know them. Get connected. Start to develop relationships with the people who are providing your food as much as you possibly can. Now, in Mexico, when Miriam and I moved there in early 2020, we had this favorite fruit stand. They were our fruit friends is what we like to call them. They had the best mangoes and papayas you've ever had. And even though Mexico never fully locked down, in the beginning of COVID, there was still a lot of uncertainty, like what's going to happen next. So we went to them and said, can we get your phone numbers? We'd like to buy our fruit from you, even if things get shut down. If they try to shut you down, we'll meet you in the back alley to buy the mangoes if that's what it comes down to. We wanted to make sure we had our farmers on, our growers on speed dial. I encourage you to do that. Get to know. If you can visit the farms, even better, but at least get to know them, get connected to them, so that if there's ever a scenario where farmers markets aren't happening or things get a little more hairy in the future, you have some connection to those people. That's another example of eggs in build. You're recognizing that there's a system that you don't want to be dependent on, that also is destructive and out of alignment with your values, so you want to start to take steps away from it. Again, it's not going to happen overnight. It's okay if you don't want to be a farmer. I would encourage, especially as a group, to go volunteer at least once at a community garden or an urban farm. I mean, it sounds like there's people here who have resources and skills in that department. You guys could come together as a freedom cell, as a community, as a freedom hub right here and do it, because all these things are much easier as a group. We're going to talk about freedom cells in a moment briefly, but I absolutely understand that it's very difficult for one person to do these things, right? But as a group, we have this support network, this support system. We can come together and encourage each other and motivate each other and share resources and share ideas and services. So as a group, maybe you watch a permaculture documentary together. You do a PDC together if you can afford it. You do things like that. You start to empower yourselves with the knowledge and skills so that you are as least dependent on these systems as possible. Now let's talk about the food system, the economic system. This is the last example I'm going to give you guys, and this is probably the most difficult one, the most challenging one. Anybody who's gone down those rabbit holes of fractional reserve banking, central banking, debt-based slavery, Federal Reserve, Bank of International Settlements, all that stuff, you guys understand. This is a crux of really a lot of how their control operates, because as our sister shared earlier, if you can wipe out wealth overnight, if you can inflate and deflate the currency, you can control the people. And you can control their ability to organize, you can control their ability to survive, ultimately, right? So the more dependent we are on those systems, the easier it is for them to, once again, socially engineer us into compliance. Like, for example, who remembers the Canadian trucker protest? Who remembers watching people get debanked and deplatformed just for donating, not even participating, just sending some money and saying, hey, I support this cause. Sorry, you can't use this platform anymore, right? That's another example of how they can control and limit people. And I mentioned the financial crisis a couple times in 2007, 2008, because it was a big part of my awakening. But let's talk about that for a moment. The banks at that time, the big banks, they were giving out loans that they knew were crap, that they knew would eventually bust to Americans all around the country. Eventually those loans did bust. People lost millions of dollars, homes, savings. And then what happened on top of that? The government bailed them out and took taxpayer dollars and gave them even more money, right? And yet, probably some of you, if not most of you, have your money in those banks right now. This is not a shame. This is just, let's take a moment of reflection. Continue to use these systems even though we know that they are evil, that we know what they're guilty of. We could also talk about the fact that Chase Bank, for example, helped Jeffrey Epstein launder the money that he used to pay off his victims. We could talk about how HSBC helped human traffickers launder their money through that and got caught and got a little fine and was able to continue to operate. We could go on and list the problems with the banking institutions, not to mention just the infrastructure and the way they're set up, but the crimes that they're involved in. And yet so many people continue to participate in them. Again, the majority of the reason I think is convenience. It's on my way home from work. I've had my money in there for 20 years. It's a lot to untangle. I've got direct deposit, I've got stocks, I've got a 401k, I've got all this stuff, man. This sounds like it's going to be a lot of work to untangle from. It probably will be. It might be. But I think it's worth it to stop supporting evil institutions. And I want to also add this, that I'm advocating something that I know is probably not as easy for some of you as it is for myself, because I haven't used a bank account since 2008. Not because I was awake in 2008. I was just out of prison, as I shared earlier, and I got a bank account, and I overdrafted a couple times, and I was like, maybe I suck at this bank thing, I shouldn't do it for a little while. Thankfully, the next year I started to wake up, and I was like, maybe I just won't deal with these people. That's also around the time I started waking up, and so I don't talk to certain government agencies and don't give them any of my money. So I understand that this is easier said than done if you have lived a life that is very much ingrained in those systems when I'm saying, hey, don't participate in them. But it is possible. So let's imagine you're right here and you got student loan debt, credit card debt, you got all your money tied up in the banking system, and you got stocks and 401k and everything, and that sounds very, very difficult to untangle from. But you have a vision of being a little more free from those systems and not supporting evil systems. One step in the right direction would be to divest from that bank, give yourself a 6-month plan if that's what it takes, or a couple of months. Again, do it as a group. There used to be this big movement about divesting from the banks. People would go to the banks together, like 10, 20 people at a time, and just shut their bank accounts down all at once. And maybe from there, you join a local credit union, small independent bank. And you could even do that while you're still in the big bank. Open the credit union account and start to transition, right? Start to move your money over. Start to switch your money over. Start to support the small independent banks, the credit unions, right? And again, as I said, come up with a plan to get your money over, untangle. And maybe even as you're looking at all the stuff you got direct deposit, you start to realize, actually, I don't need these things. Why am I paying for this? Maybe I could free up a little bit of my income by not paying for things I don't actually need and focus on things that are more important. So you're switching over to the local credit union. Now, again, I'm kind of a fan of, like, even if you don't do the credit union, the money's better stuffed under your mattress than being in the hands of criminals. Because if you know anything about fractional reserve banking, when you put your money in those big banks, your money's going to be there when you get back to get it. But in the meantime, they're investing that money in all kinds of things that you have no say on. They could be investing in the local data center. They could be investing in flock cameras. They could be investing in some pipelines on indigenous lands, things that might go completely against your values, and you have no say just because you chose to give them your money. With a credit union, you tend to at least be viewed more as members, and you tend to actually have some say over where that money goes. So I do think that's a step in the right direction. Okay, I'm pulling away from the big banking system. Now I can breathe a little easier. My conscience is a little more clean, and I'm in something small and local. Step in the right direction. I don't think that's the final frontier, so to speak, because at the end of the day, that's still on the Federal Reserve System. That's still on the dollar system. And if they do go to central bank digital currencies or digital currencies of any kind, the credit unions are going too. The credit unions are still bound by those same systems. In fact, the president of the National Credit Union Association is a regular speaker at the World Economic Forum. And he has already said that they're going to support central bank digital currencies. They basically have no choice in the matter because, again, they're part of the same system. So even though you might have a cleaner conscience and you're supporting small banks, if they announced tomorrow everything's going digital, CBDCs, it doesn't matter if you're in a big bank or a credit union. Your money will become digital as well. And for those who might say, well, what's the big deal, Derek? I use Google Pay all the time and Apple Pay and Samsung Pay. I'm pretty much digital already. That's a problem. Probably should start practicing using cash more, because the more things go digital in their system, in a state-controlled system, as we've discussed, the easier it is for them to lock you out and to control you. Just real quick, one example on that. Does anybody remember the zero COVID policy in China? Where they're basically locking people in their homes. The Chinese government, their policy went on longer than anybody else. And eventually, activists did start to get sick of it, and they started to organize. Even in a place like China with this all-pervasive police state, surveillance state, where the government can track and trace you, people were starting to organize. They were organizing online, and because the government has such surveillance, they were very quickly able to identify who was organizing these protests. So on the day the protests started to happen, when the activists went to go take the subway to the location of the protest, they pulled out their phones to scan to get on because they need a digital ID to get on the transportation. And guess what? Beep, sorry, your account's been turned off. And they literally just stopped them from being able to use public transportation to go there. the more we are a part of their systems, the easier it is for them to lock us out and to control us and to force people into compliance. I mean, this happened with a lot of people. We talked about the censorship. People, they'll go after your pocketbook. They're going to go after your money and make sure you can't do business. I mean, I've had this happen myself. So the more dependent we're on the systems, the easier it is for them to do it. So then what lies beyond credit unions and small banks? What's in this space beyond that? A bunch of different ideas that are all difficult and not perfect. But options. Some people are very much into bartering. I think bartering is great in some circumstances. Trading eggs for this, and shoot, I'll barter with you guys for books and shirts and things like that. It's great when it works, but it doesn't work in every circumstance. You can't always trade eggs for everything you need. Sometimes it's not even trade. If you're lucky enough and you can get your landlord to accept, bartering for meat or for whatever you have, then awesome. But there's going to be some scenarios where it doesn't work. But I think use it when it works. There's also people who are into things like time banks, trading hours for, services and things like that. Really unique ideas that I think work in a smaller kind of communal level. I don't know if they're going to work on a societal level. Then there's things like silver and precious metals, gold and silver. I hold some silver, I'm all for it. I'll trade you for silver and things like that. I think it can be valuable. I also think in a shit hits the fan scenario, if you don't know how to use that or to melt that silver, it's just going to become a paperweight because people are going to need to eat. They might be like, oh, cool, you want to give me silver coins? What am I going to do with that? Unless I can go take and trade it to somebody else, right? All of a sudden it might become worthless, but I try that as well. And so I'm pretty much like somebody who is diverse in my options. Like, I'll use whatever works. I'm not here to sell you on one single solution because I think we have to be adaptable and flexible. I will also say one other solution that I do think is valuable is crypto. And I know that that's controversial in some areas, and I just want to share real briefly about my own experience with that as somebody who doesn't talk to certain government agencies and who hasn't used a bank account since 2008. Private cryptos have allowed me to move between cash and back and forth and avoid the government and avoid the banks. So in 2011, as I was waking up and getting involved, that's the End the Fed movement's going on. A lot of people back then were trading the silver dimes, and they were saying, okay, this is the way to beat the Fed. You got to stop using the Federal Reserve note. I agree with them. And so we used to have this Houston Exchange Network where we had an AC repairman, we had a welder, a dentist, we had a bunch of small entrepreneurs and this list of people who all agreed they would take silver as an alternative payment. It was cool. It's like we're building our local counter economy. And then we started hearing about this Bitcoin thing. And so I decided to go, as a journalist, to go to Bitcoin conferences and try to learn and interview people. And the thing that a lot of people don't know is that back then, Bitcoin very much had a freedom, almost anarchist mindset. The people who were early in were trying to build money that was away from the banks and away from the government. And many people thought maybe this is going to be the tool that will end the Federal Reserve. And the technology still is valuable in certain ways. It's decentralized and all that good stuff. But in terms of the ethos, it has unfortunately lost its way. About 2016, 2017, Jeffrey Epstein and his friends, that's not a joke, look at the emails, Jeffrey Epstein and his friends started to get involved and invested in the infrastructure. And they took it from being about freedom money to being about, it's a stock you can invest in, and you might get rich off it. So if anybody's heard anything about Bitcoin, it's just that, oh, it's something that people, Bitcoin bros, this sort of thing, right? People think it's just some funny tool that you can park your money in. But the real original idea was that it was going to be a currency that you could actually use. And when I did my first tours in 2017 and 2018, I very much believed in that. I was going around the country and giving people $5 of Bitcoin. If you had a business, I'd give you a wallet, send you $5, because I figured the more people using Bitcoin, then I don't even have to use the dollar. We have our own alternative system. Unfortunately, as I said, I think it's lost its way, so I'm not really a big advocate for it anymore. But I do believe there are other tools, private cryptos, that have that same ethos. One of them is Monero. And also that blue flyer that you guys have is for Zano. Zano is another privacy, anonymous crypto that has the same ethos of trying to avoid banks, trying to avoid government. You can read all the information on the flyer. I'm just pointing that out to you guys. They're one of our sponsors. So for example, when they sent me 2,500 USD of their currency, the Zano currency, I was able to use that and go to a website like Travala.com to pay for a rental car. Because you can use Travala to rent hotels and cars, and you can pay in crypto. So I didn't have to use a bank account. I was able to use that. And because I've been involved in the space, I do have people that I can reach out to if I need to go back and forth. I can say, hey, can I sell you $1,000 worth of Monero? And then if we're in person, they hand me cash, and I send them crypto. So I'm just saying, I do think it can be one tool in our tool belt. I'm not saying it's going to be the be-all, end-all, save the whole world. I don't think there is such a thing. But for me, it has allowed me to not talk to the IRS and to not use banks and to move around and move my money around. So I encourage you guys to learn more about that. But those are 3 examples of exit and build. the technology, the food, and the big banking system. I get that there's a lot of steps and a lot of ideas there. I want to invite you guys to do this as a group, to come together. Did somebody end up starting the email list? I thought I saw it going on. Awesome. You're the activator tonight. You get a free shirt, whatever you like. Thank you guys for that. So don't let tonight be the end of it. Just let tonight be the beginning. In about a week or so, send out an email and say, hey, who wants to get together and have a discussion? Your first meeting, just sit around and say, what are our common interests? Hey, we're all interested in food. We're all interested in getting off big tech. We want to learn about this crypto thing, whatever it may be, and start coming up with plans. Have a meetup about it. Start coming up with a 6-month plan, a 1-year plan, together as a group. You don't all have to be on the same page about everything, guys. In fact, I think when we're talking about organizing like this, it's okay if we have a diversity of ideas. Now, when you're talking about moving on the land with people, it's a little more important to have the same values and principles. But if we're just going to collaborate in a circle like this, it's okay if we have differences of opinions. Now, what I'd like to share now and spend this last few minutes here is describing to you what my exit and build journey has been the last 5 years. Because it's always been important for me to make sure that I practice what I preach, so to speak, right? Everything that I just described to you are things that I am currently doing or have tried. I'm on Linux, I'm off big tech, I'm using crypto and silver when I can. I go to local food markets, all the whole thing. Everything I just said there and more are things that I'm doing. And this is actually my 5th tour, 4th US tour, and I did a Mexico tour. And a couple of years ago, I started to have this realization that I put so much energy into trying to help other people, writing books, podcasts, documentaries, giving presentations, all this stuff. And I started to think, wouldn't it suck if the shit hit the fan and I didn't have myself taken care of? You know, if I was just running around trying to inspire and motivate you guys, but I didn't take care of home base. So that's what I've spent the last 5 years doing, is focusing on building my exit and build journey, my Liberation 2030. And I want to share that with you guys. So first off, in 2017, when I started to think about this idea of building a community, I wrote a book called Manifesto of the Free Humans. And this was the first time I described my vision of my ideal community. Not the way everybody should live, but just my ideal vision. And it was based around 3 main principles, one of which we've already talked about, sovereignty of the individual. That was like our cornerstone. This is our guiding light. The second principles or set of principles was permaculture principles, and the way we build our buildings, the way we design our food systems, and so on and so forth. The sovereignty of the individual, permaculture principles, and the third principle that was going to guide this community I envisioned was what I just broadly called mindfulness, which for me just meant I want to work with other people who have emotional maturity, emotional intelligence, that no matter what your age is, you want to keep growing as a person. You know, you're not stuck and static in your ways. You want to keep evolving. And this included things like nonviolent communication and all sorts of tools like that. And ultimately, the reason I thought this was important is because if we're talking about building the new earth, building new systems, we don't want to bring the baggage from, our old ways, right? And the thing is, we're all coming from different backgrounds. We didn't all learn necessarily how to communicate healthy. Some of us learned to put on a smile and pretend like everything's okay. Some of us learned to scream and shout. Some of us learned to slam doors or just not talk at all. So if we don't deal with those things, we bring our old baggage as we're trying to build new communities. Ultimately, we're going to repeat the same mistakes that have been going on for a long time. So we really wanted to emphasize mindfulness is key. Also, in this community, mindfulness meant that every member of the community must meditate for at least 10 hours a week. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. That would go against the first principle, sovereignty of the individual. Sovereignty of the individual, permaculture principles, and mindfulness. That was the original vision for this community. And at the time, I was still living in Texas, and I wrote in the book, I'm going to start building this community in 2020. I had no money, no plan, no idea. I was just like, that gives me a few years to figure this out. And then 2020 comes, and of course, COVID, the gift that never stops giving, came and really motivated me to take action and actually bring this idea to life. So my partner, Miriam, she's first generation born in the U.S. Her family's from Mexico. So we've been together now the last 10 years, and every year we would go visit her family in Mexico, spend a month out there traveling around, seeing family. And in 2020, we made our annual trip. And January, I remember we were in Mexico. I'm starting to see those videos in China, people falling down. That was when I first started doing my first reporting on it, and I was telling her, baby, something weird's going on in China. We're just going to keep an eye on it and let you know what's happening. We did our trip, and we came back to the U.S. in the first week of March 2020, and all the toilet paper was gone. There's no toilet paper in the whole place. And also, Trump was starting to talk about restricting interstate travel. You guys remember this? New York's a hot spot. They're checking license plates, going to Rhode Island. They're doing all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, heck no. Oh, no. Something's not right. Because I don't know about you guys, but it's important to have red lines in the sand. If you don't know what your red lines are, you'll keep taking it. You'll keep accepting more and more and more. But for me, I always knew if they ever start restricting travel, that's not a good sign, and I need to figure something out. So when they started saying we're going to stop travel from state to state, I thought, well, look, even if the cage is the size of Texas, it's still a cage as far as I'm concerned. I want to know I can move about whenever I like. So the next day, we loaded up the Jeep. I said, let's go visit your grandpa in Mexico. I feel like we'll be better if we just a little further away from this craziness. And we headed to Mexico, and it ended up being the right move for us because Mexico ended up being the only country in the world that never had quarantine requirements or vax requirements and stuff like that. And yeah, and so we went and visited Grandpa, and through synchronicity or divine guidance, we ended up in a city called Morelia, a couple hours away from where her grandpa's at. I'd never been there my entire life, neither had she. We ended up finding out that this is where every avocado you eat is grown, within 50 miles of this area. This is a land of hot springs and cold springs. It's very resource rich, full of farms, just so much resources there. And we got pulled there, and synchronicity after synchronicity kept us there. And so summer 2020, we decided we're going to move our life there. We went back to Texas, packed up everything, came back. And in the fall of 2020, Miriam and I decided, all right, we're going to do this Conscious Agora thing in Mexico. Instead of doing it in Texas like I originally envisioned, we're going to do it in Mexico. So I put out a video and put a call out through my channels and said, guys, I'm building a community in Mexico. If you're interested, reach out. We got 500 emails from around the world. Wow. As you can imagine, this is the height of COVID, so people are in full-on panic mode. You know, some places are already getting locked down. I got emails from like a couple, like, we're a retired German dentist. We have $100,000. Can we come join your community? Wow. And I told them, I said, please don't say that to somebody. You're going to get scammed. You're going to get ripped off. We don't even have land. Like, come, slow down. We're not at that point ready to take anybody's money. But so we got these 500 responses. Miriam and I put together a questionnaire. How many people are in your group? What's your vision of community? What's your timeline? What skills, resources, finances do you have? You know, this whole thing. Sent that out. We got about 200 responses. We put those 200 responses on a non-Google spreadsheet, and we narrowed that down to 50 households, couples, families, and individuals that we felt were aligned with our vision. And so in November 2020, we started having these bi-weekly online calls, just getting to know each other. We still didn't have the land yet. We just had those core principles, and we had an idea. We didn't even know where in Mexico it was going to happen, or if it would even be in Mexico. We were sort of just open. I just knew we needed to do this idea. And so November 2020, we started having the meetings, and from November 2020 to the end of 2022, the group naturally went from 50 to 40-something to 30 to 20-something to 14 to 3 households, including myself and Miriam. And it was all natural. None of it was bad blood or anything. It was just the more clear we got on our vision of what we were trying to build. Some people were like, that's my vision. I love it. Let's do it together. And other people were like, oh, that's not really what I'm looking for. We wish you well. We want you to find what you're looking for. And some people were, they calmed down. They're like, okay, yeah, I'm not ready to do this yet. I'm going to stay where I'm at. And so it naturally turned to 3 households by the end of 2022. And then that whole time, as well as we're getting to know each other and we're developing our community vision, Miriam and I were also traveling and visiting different communities across Mexico, the US, the UK, Denmark, Costa Rica, learning the way other people have done this. And we actually got to visit the oldest intentional community in Mexico. They've been around for 45 years. And I got to interview the founders, and she is an amazing woman. And I just picked her brain, like, what would you do differently? What was your biggest mistake? And all these kind of things, just learning from people who've been doing this. And all of that sort of informed what we started to do. And our 3 principles, you know, they evolved to be more full principles, like we believe in off-grid, we want to do natural building, we believe in self-defense, all these kinds of things. So we're learning from other communities, we're also searching for land. And as 2022 turned into 2023, we decided on this one piece of property, we're like, we need to make this happen. The interesting thing, this piece of property was the first property that Miriam and I had ever seen in May 2020. We went and saw it. This is before we even started the community idea. And it was a beautiful piece of property. It's 23 acres, has 150 avocado trees, bananas, limes, pears, pomegranates, peaches, drip lines already installed on all the trees. It's got 2 springs of water coming out of the ground, a pond. The western and southern border are a nice sized stream that's not a full-on river, but it's wide and it's deep enough for somebody my size to swim in. And when we first saw this property, of course, we fell in love. They told us the price. It was $180,000 US. Neither her or I come from family wealth, so it was like, okay, that's cool. We can't do that, you know. That'll maybe another time, right? We moved on. We started to do this community idea. But as we continued to look for land all across Mexico's beautiful lands and elsewhere, we found other properties that were more affordable, flatter, but they didn't have any food. They didn't have any water. And we just kept coming back to this property. And eventually our group decided we need to make this happen. Like this, there's a reason it was the first piece of land we saw when we came to Mexico. And so in 2023, our group of the 3 households, what we call the founding family, we put down some money and we started paying monthly on the land. We did it without any banks involved, because one of the cool things about Mexico, with less bureaucracy, we were able to sign a private contract with the previous owner. It was notarized, it was legal and everything, and we just, paid as we could. And also at the same time, instead of trying to look for new members, we decided, before we add anybody else, now that the three of us have been through some stuff, let's start working on our foundation. Let's start building the human mechanics. So we spent a good 1.5 to 2 years developing our conflict resolution process. We started taking nonviolent communication training. We started working on our decision-making process. We took sociocracy training. We started working on our entry and exit process. How do people enter the community? How do people leave the community? And thinking about all these different things. Now, you can't plan for every scenario, so you're not trying to think of every little detail. The point is to have systems in place so that if and when something goes wrong, you can say, hey guys, look, we all agreed to this. We wrote and we signed that if we can't come to an agreement within 3 months, we're going to hire an outside mediator, right? Whatever it may be. We installed all these systems. And I think this is a mistake that sometimes people make when they're trying to build community. Everybody's in a hurry to build the buildings, to design the infrastructure. And that's important. But if you don't have the human mechanics done, I've seen it. I've seen it throughout COVID. I saw lots of people from around the world rushing to Mexico because it was such a free thing during COVID. And 6 months later, they're like, hey, you like freedom? I like freedom. Let's go buy land. And they don't do any deeper work on like, wait, what does that really mean? How do you want to raise your children? What is it? There's a little more than just knowing, I don't want to be vaccinated. You don't want to be vaccinated. Cool. Let's go build on a community. There's more details, but some people were in a hurry. And then 6 months later, they're suing each other, having to untangle because they got money and lawyers involved. Or they get scammed and stuff like that. So we were real meticulous and intentional with our time. We spent a good 1.5 years designing all that human mechanics and slowly paying off our land. And then in 2025, we opened it back up and said, all right, we're ready to take in potential new members. And so we announced that, and we had 15 new members, or potential members come in. We call them activators. And over the last 1.5 years, we've been getting to know them. And once again, those 15 activators turned into 4 new members. So we're at 6 households now. 2 more families are being vetted right now that might join. And our goal is basically to have 8 to 10 households on this property. Everybody has their own 1/4 acre. You build your home. You do what you want in your home. We all get access to the fruit trees and to the waterways and everything like that. It's going to be our village that we live in, but also that the idea is we're going to convert these 2 old barns into what we call the Holistic Education Center. And this is basically going to be a place where we can teach people permaculture, where we can teach people exit and build, everything that I've talked about tonight. It's basically, I kind of like to describe it as like an activation boot camp. Come here, learn some things from us, and then go home and apply the ideas in your community, right? Because the answer isn't we all need to move to Mexico, and maybe not even that we all need to get land. I do think there's value in that, especially when people are telling you you're going to own nothing to be happy. It might be a good idea to own something, but even if that's not your position, I think that you can find inspiration in this. And as I shared, Miriam and I didn't have the money to do this by ourselves. We had to come together as a community, and each new member who bought in helped pay off that debt. And in January 2025, we paid off the land, and now we own it outright. We have the deed to the land. We did the whole thing without a bank, any loans from the banks, anything like that. We took a small loan from a private friend who we've been paying off, but no banks. And that was one of our big successes. And then you heard Manish mention, we have an event every year in Morelia where we moved to. Our land's an 1.5 hours outside the city, but we live at the moment on the edge of the city. And every year in January, we hold the People's Reset, which is basically a 5-day solutions-focused event about all these ideas. We get about 300 to 400 people from a dozen countries who come out. It's 5 days of family and kids activities, music, workshops, solutions, dancing, cacao ceremony, the whole thing. You're all invited. March 2027, I'd love to see some of you there. You can also watch for free online. We host the whole thing and stream it all for free. But this year, after the People's Reset, we had our entire community there, and we all went to the land, and we got to walk the property, and we all got to pick our home sites. And basically, Miriam and I got to go first, and everybody who joined after was next. And so we got to walk the land and find the piece of the earth that this is where we're going to build our home. This is the piece of the earth that we're going to steward, that we're going to take care of. And we picked our home site. That was another big success. And a couple months ago, our community came together. We bought our first farm truck. We're thinking of calling him Truck Norris. And Truck Norris is going to help us harvest those 150 avocado trees. Because I didn't know anything about avocados before other than eating them. But one avocado tree can easily produce 300 to 400 pounds of avocados. It's just insane the abundance that comes from these trees. And it's pretty hard to harvest avocados with the Volkswagen Tiguan. But we've been doing it for a couple of years, and you can only do so much. So now we got Truck Norris. So we're starting to harvest the avocados. We're also about to buy an oil press. We're going to start bottling our own avocado oil. We also have a lot of agave on the land, so we're going to start bottling maybe some of our own mezcal for those who are into that. And And so those are some of the successes. And in the most recent one, right before I came on this trip, just 3 weeks ago in Mexico, Miriam and I just bought our first 100 sugarcrete blocks. So have you guys ever heard of hempcrete? You know about hempcrete? So those who don't know, hempcrete is basically taking the fiber from the cannabis plant, the hemp plant, and as you know, it can be used for clothes, for all kinds of material. Well, people have learned that you can use industrial hemp and take the fibers from it, and you can create these blocks, which can be used to build homes. It's fire resistant, it's mold proof, soundproof, and it's a beautiful thing. And that's been around for a couple decades. It's growing slowly in the U.S. and elsewhere. Well, sugarcrete is this. Well, I mean, in terms of the modern world, right? In terms of production. And now, unfortunately, the U.S. government is pretty restrictive in some places in terms of how people can build it. But people have been doing it for a while. Yeah, sugarcrete is the same concept, but with sugarcane. So in Mexico and India and other places where people are growing sugarcane, same thing. They usually harvest the sugar and then you just throw away the waste. And the waste, which is called bagasse, is usually set on fire, so it creates smog. It can go into the soil and the water. It can be a waste product. People have now learned just in the last few years how to do the same thing. And so we're working with Mexican farmers who are doing this. It's all called biocrete. So they're actually doing hempcrete, sugarcrete, agavecrete, and cococrete with coconut fiber. And sugarcrete is the same thing. It's mold resistant, fireproof, and soundproof. And so we actually had one of the farmers speak at the People's Reset earlier this year. And after we got connected with him, we found out that there's farmers in our same state, so we don't have to import it from somewhere else. We can just get it. And so right before I left, we took Truck Norris and we went and picked up our first 100 sugarcrete blocks, because on our property, our quarter acre, Miriam and I, we have this old building which apparently used to be used as a school for kids. And it's not a huge building. It's probably about the length of this, this patio here, a little less wide, kind of like a tiny house you could say, but it's got a concrete foundation. It's got some old crappy walls that we're going to replace with the sugarcrete, but the support beams are just as strong as ever. We're going to put on a zinc roof and start collecting rainwater. When I get home from this trip, we're going to buy a couple hundred more bricks. We're about to build our first sugarcrete home on our plot. So that's another exciting thing. So that's what I've been doing the last 5 years, is just getting this community idea together, finding our right members, laying the foundation so we can do this. And we're actually, if you follow my work, or if you subscribe on the Conscious Resistance, next month, maybe September, we're going to be offering a 5-week webinar going really deep into everything I just described. Like, how did we do the decision making? How did we come up with a conflict resolution? How did we buy the property and all that stuff? For anybody who wants to learn these ideas. And my ultimate vision is for the Conscious Agora not to just be one community in Mexico, but to be a network of communities around the world that are united by common values and common principles, right? They can be diverse in all these different ways, but we would know these communities believe in sovereignty of the individual. These communities believe in permaculture. These communities believe in mindfulness. And the rest can be as unique as it needs to be. But that's what we're aiming to build. And this is my vision, guys, for an alternative world that I call Liberation 2030. This is where I've been putting my energy in tonight. And my last message to you guys, and the reason we did this tour, is just to invite you, as I said earlier, to stop putting all of your energy into just watching the world get worse, and to only doing that, and start putting your energy into what you do want. If you don't want their vision, if you don't want the Great Reset, you don't want Agenda 2030, what is it that you are after? What are you trying to build? I want to invite you tonight, as you settle into your homes and your beds, to pull out a pen and a pad or pull out your phone and start to write it down. What is that vision you want? What is it that you're aiming for? And if you're a creative person, draw it. Create a vision board, whatever it may be. Take it out of your mind and be able to see it and look and say, this is what I'm trying to do. And then come up with a plan and work together to make it happen. That's what we need to do, because the other side is highly organized. They think long term. They're meeting every year at the Bilderberg Group, World Economic Forum, so on and so forth. They're working with every government around the world, multinational corporations, trillions of dollars. And some would say we're outgunned, we're outspent, we're outnumbered. But that's false. They're outnumbered. We're just not so organized. So we need to get more organized and focusing on what our vision is. Does anybody know where that phrase, you owe nothing and be happy, comes from? The origin of that? So there's this 2016 essay from the World Economic Forum. So there's this 2016 essay by the World Economic Forum that's called Welcome to 2030, I Own Nothing, Have No Privacy, and Life Has Never Been Better. And it was written by a Danish politician, and she's describing this vision of the future that they're trying to convince us is a better world, right? The interesting thing is, about halfway down that essay, it says, sometimes I think about the people we left behind. The people who technology moved too fast for them. The people who didn't like the political changes. They now live outside of the cities in 19th century towns and self-supplying communities. Guys, that's us. That's going to be us. But instead of them making us think that it's some bad thing, we're going to be living in homesteads. permaculture paradises. We're going to be having this network of people trading services, goods, ideas, resources, free-range kids. I mean, that's my vision. That's what my Liberation 2030 is. I actually rewrote their essay a couple years ago and published it. You can find it online. It's called Welcome to 2030. I own land, live amongst like-minded people, and life has never been better. I actually turned it into a short mini documentary you can find on my website called Liberation 2030 that describes this vision, because this is what I saw, this is what I knew I wanted to do. Live with other like-minded people, with the free-range kids, the clean water, the organic food, all of it, working together, common values. I wrote a book about it. I spent time thinking about it. I'm not asking you to write a book, but I am asking you to start thinking about what that vision is and putting everything you've got into it, guys. Because everybody here, as we wrap up, all of you guys said you know what the Great Reset is, you know what Agenda 2030 is. None of us here can claim ignorance. Nobody here can say they didn't know what was happening and what these people are trying to do. So if we know that and we choose not to act, we are selling out these coming generations. And in our indigenous communities, we're taught to think about the 7 generations and beyond. We're taught to think not only how our actions impact those of us right here in this moment, but our children and our grandchildren and so on and so forth. Even if you don't have children, which I don't yet, but your nieces and nephews, your friends' kids, whatever it may be, those coming generations, the people we will never meet, are 100% depending on us. The world they're going to be born into depends on what we do or do not do. And all of you said you know what's happening, what's coming, what these people would like the world to be. If we see that and we choose not to act because it's too hard, because I'm nervous, because I'm scared, because it involves change, then we know what's going to happen. We know what world they're going to be born into. We would be betraying those coming generations. Not only that, when we talk about the 7 generations, I like to extend it backwards and think about those who came before us, our parents and our grandparents and great-grandparents and so on and so forth. Every one of us, no matter what your skin color is, your place